A school employee spoke to all students and stated that students who engage in fights will be punished. The students began to whisper when the man announced that Tang Xiaobao, a ninth-grade student, had maliciously provoked and attacked Liu Qiang. Sputtering with saliva, the school employee declared that this was a very serious situation, so the decision was made together with the principal to expel Xiaobao. The students lined up in front of the stage were stunned with surprise when they heard that Xiaobao was being expelled. Two of the boys were even happy about this because after Tang Xiaobao's expulsion, according to one of them, the school would be quiet. The girls who were whispering on the sidelines were upset. One liked Xiaobao, and the other said that Liu Qiang was the instigator of the fight. But the school employee was adamant and demanded that Tang Xiaobao leave the school grounds immediately. Our hero Tang Xiaobao was a simple son of a villager, while his enemy Liu Qiang was a highly qualified doctor. When Tang Xiaobao heard that he had been expelled, he turned around and looked with disdain at Liu Qiang, who was the reason for his expulsion. The guy then turned his head back. A sly grin appeared on his face. He chuckled without saying anything to the offender. But a guy in a white coat named Liu Qiang stopped him and asked our hero if he had told him that he could go. Liu Qiang started to provoke Tang Xiaobao into a fight, asking if the guy was too scared to fight him. Tang Xiaobao raised his voice and asked Liu Qiang if he really thought he could beat him, since he had been expelled from school. He came closer and asked what was so special about Liu Qiang, because after a fight, the guy always just runs to complain to his family. Liu Qiang replied that this was simply nonsense, because society was structured in such a way that only a person's status mattered. The white-haired guy grinned and looked at our hero, concluding that he still didn't know this truth. The main character shouted that he was ready to fight his enemy at any time, since that was what he wanted. He looked at Liu Qiang with hatred and declared that as for Wang Jing, she was only his girlfriend. At that moment, Wang Jing herself approached the guys. The girl turned to her boyfriend. She looked at him with sadness in her eyes. The girl apologized and admitted to our hero that she always thought that they were from different worlds, and therefore they were not suitable for each other. Liu Qiang told the protagonist that Wang Jing was now his girlfriend, because Tang Xiaobao was a lower level. The main character, who was seething with anger, did not answer either his girlfriend or the guy who took her away from him. Liu Qiang decided to finish off our hero and stated that yesterday evening he and Wang Jing were in the same hotel room. He took another step closer to the guy and said that he was very surprised when it turned out that Tang Xiaobao had never been with her. Tang Xiaobao became even more angry when his enemy started laughing at him straight in the face. Wang Jing turned her back to her now ex-boyfriend, who loudly shouted his girlfriend's name. The girl screamed at him not to call her that again, because she didn't know him and didn't want to see him again. The protagonist remained standing motionless, looking after the girl who betrayed him and left with another. When it was already dark outside, Tang Xiaobao, sitting on the asphalt, told his father on the phone that he was fine and advised him to take better care of himself. The boy didn't know how to explain to his parents that he was forbidden to take the entrance exams. Tang Xiaobao even prepared a gift for his girlfriend earlier to confess his love, but did not have time to give it to her. Enraged, he sent Wang Jing a message in his mind and promised himself that he would not give up even if he was expelled from school. The guy was shocked when the bracelet he bought on his hand suddenly started to glow. He didn't understand what kind of alien technology it was. He was stunned when the data extraction was completed and the divine doctor system began to activate. The young man was indignant that the magic system must be playing a joke on him, since he was now an acupuncture master, massage therapist, gynecologist, and pediatrician. He was clearly upset when another message from the system appeared, stating that he could not change his initial profession of gynecologist. The protagonist closed his eyes and the system began initializing the transmission of system data to provide Tang Xiaobao with the necessary knowledge about human acupuncture points. The guy was lamenting that acupuncture treatment for gynecology was tasteless, but the system offered him super medical books for activating hidden tasks. The protagonist was stunned when he heard about such an impressive feature. The system continued to amaze the guy. An image of a super book about medicine that the system could give him for completing the task appeared before Tang Xiaobao's eyes. The stunned young man pressed 2 fingers on the image of the books because he would not mind receiving such a gift from the system. The guy could barely hold the weight in his hands when the system immediately gave him an incredibly thick book about medicine. Tang Xiaobao read the cover, which said that the medical book was created in the territory of Hongmeng and contained the secrets of mysterious medicine. Now, the young man was not averse not only to becoming a divine doctor for the immortals, but also to receiving such a treasure as a gift. Our hero's face twisted as the system issued a notification that, unfortunately, the guy's reputation was not enough to continue studying the book. Indignant, he crossed his arms over his chest and said that, as he understood it, It was just like in a computer game. The more famous you are, the higher your reputation. The magic system called our hero a fool when the guy laughed and stated without any evidence that he would find a way to get into the local newspaper tomorrow. The protagonist became very angry upon hearing this insult, angrily clenched his fist and screamed, asking the system if it wanted to die. A pixelated image of a dog appeared before his eyes, and the system apologized to the dear doctor, saying that it had simply malfunctioned for a second. But this didn't calm the guy down. He continued to shake his fist at the system, shouting, asking if it really considered him a fool. Tang Xiaobao began waving his arms wildly, just as a woman with a small child passed by. The woman, stunned by the strange guy's behavior, covered her son's face with her hands and asked him not to look there, but rather to go home. The main character was desperate. He didn't understand what kind of stupid system this was where everyone treated him like a loser. When Tang Xiaobao received a new message from the system that he could increase his reputation by treating patients well, the young man smiled and praised his character. The boy froze when the magic system notified him that he had received a newbie's gift pack for completing the basic medical skills training. Frustrated with the way the system worked, the young man asked her out loud what other advantages she had. He looked at his palms and said that she shouldn't blame him for what he did when the system shut down, saying that Tang Xiaobao's mental abilities were questioned. With a sly grin, our young hero swung his fist and looked at his bracelet, intending to destroy it. Tang Xiaobao wasn't at all alarmed by the notification that the system would stop working if it was damaged, and he pressed the yes button. Our young hero's expression changed and he frowned when, after pressing the button, the system worked and gave him something. A small turquoise plastic tag appeared in Tang Xiaobao's palms. It was a talisman that gives a person resistance to poison. Then the guy raised his index finger and shouted at the top of his lungs that, now that he had a system, Liu Qiang and his rich family would be crushed. A moment later, a crushed soda can flew at the young man's head because the guy was making too much noise. He grimaced as he received a blow to the head, and the offender shouted at Tang Xiaobao to stop making noise on the street in the middle of the night. Soon, Tang Xiaobao received an alarming call from his sister, who asked him to rush to the city hospital because his mother had suddenly become ill. When his sister said she didn't know why, but his mother had suddenly lost consciousness, our hero told her to take care of her parents and said he was leaving immediately. At the hospital, the sister threw herself into her brother's arms and told him that their mother had suffered a critical brain hemorrhage, and Tang Xiaobao asked how this could have happened. Tang Qingshan, Tang Xiaobao's father, was also there, crying and begging Dean Zhang and Director Yuan to save his wife, as they were experts and famous doctors. Hospital Director Yuan Dongsheng and Dean Zhang Amen only listened silently to the grief-stricken man's pleas, their faces devoid of joy. Dean Zhang told Tang Qingshan that he could understand his feelings, but the patient's condition had worsened, and she now had a severe cerebral hemorrhage. A concerned nurse came running and screamed, informing the dean that the patient's brain activity had suddenly dropped and his heart rate had dropped sharply. Tang Qingshan stood by his wife's bedside, crying and holding her hand, begging Chunmei to wake up quickly and not leave them, because he didn't know what they would do without her. The protagonist decided to use his new system and ordered it to open. A glowing circle instantly appeared before his eyes. Meanwhile, our hero's mother's life support monitors were showing disappointing data, and her heart rate was dropping sharply. The woman who was connected to an oxygen mask lay on the bed and sighed heavily. Tang Xiaobao's mother was visibly unwell. The protagonist looked coldly at the doctor from under his brows and asked Dean Zhang why they didn't perform the operation. The director replied that the operation could not be performed now and shouted at the boy, calling him an idiot who did not understand anything, but blamed their hospital. Ignoring the director's insults, Tang Xiaobao asked Dean Zhang what the biggest problem facing the operation was now. The elderly doctor replied that the patient had too much blood in her skull, and that she was now in shock, so she would not survive the operation. Then the young man, worried about his mother's life, asked the hospital dean why they didn't use acupuncture for treatment. The director shouted that acupuncture could only be used to cleanse the meridians, and that it was of no use in cases of massive cerebral hemorrhage. Our hero shouted back that it was because the doctor didn't understand how to place the needles correctly, and declared that he wanted to treat his mother this way himself. Dean Zhang asked if Tang Xiaobao really knew acupuncture, and warned that if he did, he would be responsible for his mother's life. Tang Xiaobao asked the doctor not to worry and assured him that he knew what he needed to do, agreed to take responsibility, and asked him to bring silver needles. The protagonist approached his mother's bed and first checked her pulse. Dean Zhang stood nearby and closely watched the boy's actions. With a trembling hand, the boy applied the first silver needle to the acupuncture point and the hospital director told the dean that he should not allow the boy to do this. Sweating from the strain, Tang Xiaobao closed his eyes to concentrate, and Dean Zhang asked the director to be quiet, because the guy was now a doctor too and needed to be respected. Our hero told himself not to be nervous because he had to save his mother's life. He made up his mind, holding the needle in his hand. The young man concentrated. He took 2 silver needles and told himself that he must be calm and dexterous. Dean Zhang was surprised when he saw our hero using the ancient method of needle and stripe, and he wondered who this child was. A bead of sweat was running down the guy's face. He was nervous, but he finally found the courage to insert the first needle into the acupuncture point. A moment later, the woman's hand, to which the pulse oximeter was connected, twitched and she began to regain consciousness. The nurse monitoring the vital signs monitor said the woman's blood pressure and heart rate were returning to normal. Hospital director Yuan Dongsheng couldn't believe his eyes and declared that what happened was a true miracle. Our hero's sister covered her face with her hands. Tears appeared in her eyes. She told her brother that he had overcome it. The father hugged his son tightly and told him that he was absolutely amazing, because his mother's numbers were now normal. The main character smiled and told his dad that he knew this and asked if he could stop hugging him. Dean Zhang cleared his throat and said that the acupuncture procedure was very tiring, so let Tang Xiaobao go to his office for now and rest. Our hero's father thanked Dean Zhang and asked his son to go with his grandfather to the office. The boy was a little perplexed but agreed. Tang Xiaobao wasn't at all happy that he had cured his mother, because now he had to come up with an excuse for how he had done it. Dean Zhang loomed over our hero and asked if he was the legendary miracle doctor. The guy started denying it, claiming that it all happened by chance. The elderly doctor raised his eyebrows in surprise when he heard that the boy had performed his first acupuncture and called him a genius. Tang Xiaobao felt uneasy. He originally wanted to be humble, but now his words sounded like bragging, and he didn't know how to explain it to the old man. Dean Zhang grabbed our hero by the shoulders and invited him to work as a doctor in their hospital, because this way he will become the best doctor and save many people around the world. The main character started crying because this old man was too scary and pushy. He started begging him because he was just a child. The boy sat down in the corner, offended, and Dean Zhang scratched the back of his head and remembered that Tang Xiaobao hadn't even finished school yet. As he was leaving, the protagonist told Grandpa Zhang that he would help him as soon as he had time. But for now, he needed to go to the toilet. The dean peeked out of his office and shouted at Tang Xiaobao not to forget to come tomorrow, and our hero ran down the corridor, replying that he understood everything. When the guy ran into another room, he sighed with relief because he was finally able to leave. A girl was sitting on the sofa nearby. The main character looked closely at this girl and immediately noticed that she reminded him of someone. He was surprised when he recognized the red-haired girl as Huoya from his college. The girl was clearly unwell, holding her stomach. School flower Huoya was in so much pain that she screamed and tears appeared in her eyes. She was surprised when Tang Xiaobao suddenly sat down next to her and hugged her. Our hero thought that the girl's skin was very smooth and soft. Huoya screamed loudly, accusing the protagonist of being a pervert, and pushed her away when he grabbed her hand. The protagonist began to claim that he was not a pervert and advised the college girl to see a doctor because she was sick. Wiping away tears, an angry Huoya called the boy a bully and said it was no wonder he was expelled from school. Tang Xiaobao was saddened to hear such words addressed to him. He mentally activated the magic system to help the girl. Huoya felt ashamed of her remarks and apologized to the guy, saying that she shouldn't have rubbed salt into his wound. But Tang Xiaobao forced a smile and pretended not to understand anything. He again said that he knew the girl was sick and he could help her. A small demon and angel began to circle above Huoya's head. The demon wanted to beat the guy, and the angel simply assumed that Tang Xiaobao had problems with his head. Having the skills of a first-level gynecologist, our hero assumed that the girl had dysmenorrhea and could not take medication for a long time. It turned out that Tang Xiaobao was right because the girl, stuttering and trembling, asked how he knew this. Tang Xiaobao proudly crossed his arms over his chest and replied that he was a doctor. He decided to show off in front of the beauty to interest her. The hospital director came out into the corridor and told Tang Xiaobao that the guy had opened his eyes today. He didn't expect acupuncture to be so miraculous. Intrigued, the red-haired girl asked the young man if he really had such abilities. Tang Xiaobao scratched his head and said that he was the best at gynecology, and stated that not only female doctors could treat gynecological diseases. Tensing up, Huoya asked if our hero was really looking for female patients, specifically to conduct research. Waving his hand, the guy turned around and replied that he simply saw that the girl was in pain and wanted to help, but he didn't expect that she would be so distrustful of him. Seeing the young man leaving, Huoya changed her mind and shouted at Tang Xiaobao to stop. A desperate Huoya admitted that she was in pain and that experts were unable to help her, and asked if Tang Xiaobao could really solve her problem. Tang Xiaobao said that if yin and yang are in harmony, the body will be healthy, and acupuncture can be used to clear the meridians and cure the girl. The girl, who was already barely able to bear the pain, asked the young man if acupuncture was really that beneficial. The protagonist closed his eyes, scratched his chin, and replied that acupuncture is not a problem, but it is just a little complicated. Huoya asked the guy not to give her false hope because she knew that her disease was incurable. The young man replied that it wasn't that he couldn't cure her, it was just that acupuncture required contact with the skin. Huoya got angry and jumped up from the sofa and shouted that our hero was a fraud and a pervert, and she knew that he couldn't heal her. Indignant, Tang Xiaobao asked how she could slander him and asked her to let him tell her how to at least ease the pain. Huoya, her face twisted in anger, asked if he had any other twisted ideas he wanted to share. The guy stood up and walked down the corridor. He turned around and told the girl to follow him so he could show her. They stood in front of a poster with a human anatomy, and Tang Xiaobao advised her to massage the acupuncture points to relieve the pain. Confused, Huoya said that it sounded very complicated and asked the guy if he was really not lying to her now. The guy asked to let him show her. He took her hands, and Huoya immediately noticed that she felt much better. Blushing, she began to look at Tang Xiaobao's face. This was the first time in her life that a boy had touched her hand. Tang Xiaobao warned that this was just a way to relieve the pain, and if she wanted to be completely cured, the only way was acupuncture. Without answering, Huoya turned away, and the guy was surprised when he noticed that the girl actually blushed. The boys' conversation was interrupted by our young hero's sister, who told her brother that their mother had already woken up and that she would come for him later. Huoya and Tang Xiaobao blushed when they were caught together, and the girl began to justify herself by saying that the guy was just helping her cure her illness. Our hero's sister grinned. She didn't believe her words and asked if this was how they treated diseases. The pink-haired girl's cheeks turned red with shame and embarrassment. She thanked Tang Xiaobao and decided to leave. Tang Xiaobao's sister told her brother that Huoya should be his girlfriend, and he put his hand on her head and replied that she was just his patient. The disappointed sister lowered her sad eyes to the floor and said that she would not think about it anymore because Huoya would never be with someone like her brother anyway. The indignant protagonist asked his younger sister why she so often looked down on him and treated him with arrogance. The girl adjusted her brother's collar and asked him to accept the reality that he would always be alone. The protagonist seemed to have turned into a cracked statue. He began to repeat in his head that he was not going to be alone. Worried about his mother's condition, the guy immediately burst into her room to ask how she was. The woman still felt unwell and confessed to Tang Xiaobao that she thought she would never see her son again. The young man hugged his mother tightly and said that now she could be sure that she would recover, and that he would not allow her to suffer anymore. She put her hand on his shoulder and said that she didn't want to know where the guy learned such skills, but he had to promise her one thing. Bursting into tears, the woman covered her mouth with her hand and told her son to know that not everyone needs to be saved, but he needs to remain a kind and not frivolous person. The protagonist asked his mother not to doubt him and promised that he would do everything in his power. Huoya knocked on the door carefully, said hello, and asked our hero if he could come out to see her for a minute. Tang Xiaobao's mother smiled kindly at her son and told him to quickly go and talk to the girl. The guy went outside and asked Huoya what was wrong, and she admitted that she wanted to invite Tang Xiaobao to dinner. The protagonist was visibly surprised. He pointed at himself and asked again if she really wanted to invite him to eat together. Looking down, the girl blushed and admitted that she felt better after the massage, so she also asked him for further treatment. Tang Xiaobao agreed to go out to lunch with a girl from his college if she paid for it. The young man was surprised when they arrived in Desheng. Apparently the girl was very rich because it was the most famous, expensive restaurant in the area. The guy walked inside and was greeted by luxurious furnishings. A wide hall with walls and a floor made of light marble. Coincidentally, our hero immediately ran into his inveterate enemy Liu Qiang, who promised Wang Jing to treat her to a delicious meal today. The young man was perplexed. At first, he did not understand what his ex-girlfriend Wang Jing was doing in this expensive restaurant. Liu Qiang was angry when he turned around and saw Tang Xiaobao in front of him. He asked how the guy knew they were here and assumed that he wanted to stop them. Wang Jing asked Tang Xiaobao not to be a fool, since he had no ability or background, and in her opinion he could only carry bricks after being expelled. There were other college kids in the restaurant, and they surrounded our hero and started calling him a hooligan and a trash, accusing him of coming to spy on Liu Qiang and Wang Jing. The protagonist spread his arms out to the sides and calmly replied to Liu Qiang and Wang Jing that he came here just to eat. Wang Jing smirked, crossed her arms over her chest, and laughed, asking if Tang Xiaobao really thought he could afford to eat at this restaurant. Tang Xiaobao became angry and demanded that Wang Jing mind her own business, reminding her that he was expelled from school because he wanted to help her. Wang Jing replied that she didn't need such trash to help her since she had Liu Qiang, and Liu Qiang said that he seemed to have forgotten to beat Tang up well last time. Huoya ran into the restaurant hall holding 2 ice cream cones in her hands and asked Liu Qiang what he was doing there. Liu Qiang gasped in surprise when, coincidentally, Huoya was also there and asked to be allowed to introduce his girlfriend, Wang Jing. Huoya smiled and asked if her eyesight was failing her. And Liu Qiang had a girlfriend recently. The white-haired boy felt awkward, hugged Wang Jing's waist, and asked Tang Xiaobao to leave if he didn't want to embarrass himself in front of the school flower. The protagonist apologized and reminded that he really came to the restaurant to eat, but did not expect to meet pathetic barking dogs there. Liu Qiang became angry and started yelling at our hero, asking if he wanted to be beaten again since he was using such language. Huoya asked the impudent Liu Qiang if he was really so strong outside of school that he wanted to challenge her family. The angry white-haired boy asked Huoya why he was helping Tang Xiaobao. It was a waste of time. Huoya took our hero's arm and told Liu Qiang that he had misunderstood, as she had invited Tang Xiaobao to dinner. Liu Qiang and Wang Jing's mouths widened in surprise because they didn't think that the school flower would invite that scumbag Tang Xiaobao to dinner. The snow-white-haired boy shouted, asking Huoya if she had rejected all the boys in the school to choose Tang Xiaobao. Without saying anything, Huoya suggested that Tang Xiaobao go into the hall because they didn't need to deal with those brainless primates. Huoya and our hero left, and Liu Qiang asked Wang Jing what kind of dirty trick Xiaobao had used to get so close to that girl. He stopped himself, saying that no matter what stupid trick he used, he was still going to teach Tang Xiaobao a lesson. The protagonist thanked his new companion because if it weren't for her, no one would be able to stop Tang Xiaobao if he went on a rampage. Huoya was worried and asked the boy to be careful in the future, as Liu Qiang's father was not the kind of person to mess with. The guy pointed his thumb at himself and told the girl that she could have confidence in him, because he was not the same Xiaobao that he was before. The pink-haired girl stared at our hero with surprised eyes and didn't answer him. She whispered to the young man to show her this new brave man, Tang Xiaobao, when the time came, and our hero froze in awkwardness. The protagonist immediately decided to change the subject and asked who Huoya's father was, if even Liu Qiang was afraid of him. Looking down with sad eyes, the girl replied that it wasn't such a big secret, and she was surprised that the guy didn't know that her dad was the mayor of the city. Tang Xiaobao was startled and asked the girl if she was sure her father would allow him to stay at her house to teach her massage. Huoya looked at him angrily from under her brows, snorted, and offered to come to her house today and teach her if he was so worried. The main character screamed in fear and burst into tears. He wondered if all modern girls these days were really that fierce. After dinner in the car, the guy asked if Huoya's father was really not at home. The girl replied that her father was at a meeting. Tang Xiaobao asked the girl if she was afraid that he would do something out of the ordinary, since it was dark outside, and she replied that he wouldn't dare because of her father's status. She took him to her house and said that they couldn't afford a mansion here, they were just renting an apartment. And Tang Xiaobao was delighted with the view of the first-class area. Tang Xiaobao suggested that in that case her father was a good mayor with a pure character, and the girl replied that she would tell her father about him, and perhaps he would help him find a job. When the boys approached the door of the apartment, the young man thought that it was no wonder that Huoya was such a strict girl. He sat down in a chair and Hua offered him some tea while she took a bath, and Tang Xiaobao's eyes turned into hearts. The guy hinted and Huoya got angry at him, threatening to throw him out of the apartment if he still had any nasty thoughts. The protagonist noticed a large teddy bear in the girl's room and asked if she had been into that back in school. After her shower, blushing with embarrassment, Huoya came out to our hero in her nightgown and announced that she was ready for acupuncture. Tang Xiaobao's nose started bleeding after he saw the girl, and she noticed his reaction and started screaming, threatening to kill him. The girl turned her back to him and told him to hurry up. Tang Xiaobao asked her not to worry because he was a miracle doctor. Huoya lay down on her bed and closed her eyes. She pursed her lips and squeezed her eyes shut. The girl was sweating from excitement. As soon as the protagonist touched her to begin the procedure, the girl immediately grabbed the young doctor by the hand. He asked what was wrong with her. Huoya explained that it was a reflex from the touch of someone else's hand, and she felt uneasy. Tang Xiaobao asked what they should do and why she wasn't embarrassed to grab the guy's hand when she had never been so close to guys before. Huoya became angry again and shouted, asking Tang Xiaobao if he wanted to die. He replied that it was just a joke and he had a simple way to solve the problem. When Tang Xiaobao began the procedure, the girl felt pain. He asked her to be quiet because the sounds distracted him. The girl wondered who Tang Xiaobao really was. Because he was so knowledgeable in acupuncture and had relieved her pain so quickly, Tang Xiaobao was stunned with fear when the front door creaked. Huoya said that it was her father who unexpectedly returned early. The guy asked why the girl was so afraid of her father, assuming that he was as ferocious as a big gorilla. Huoya, pale with fear, did not explain anything and asked the guy why he didn't jump out of the window. The main character screamed and cursed as he looked out of the girl's bedroom window, saying he would die if he jumped from the 8th floor. Huoya realized that they had done nothing shameful and that she had nothing to fear, so she allowed Tang Xiaobao to stay, and Tang Xiaobao agreed with her. The girl's father, who also happened to be the city's mayor, dressed in a black business suit, opened the door and stood before the boys. Mayor Luo Wenbao was surprised, not angry, when he saw a guest in the room. The father asked his daughter if it was really her classmate. Sitting up straight and relaxed on the bed, the girl smiled and confirmed that he was her classmate, and Tang Xiaobao introduced himself to his father. The man calmly sat down in a chair opposite the bed and asked them not to be nervous, noticing that the boys were uneasy. However, in his heart, Mayor Luo Wenbao himself was quite nervous. He wondered if her daughter really had a boyfriend. The red-haired man with thick eyebrows glared at our hero, whom he suspected of dating Huoya. Tang Xiaobao forced a nervous smile and told his uncle that he had to go because he still had some unfinished business. Mayor Luo Wenbao smiled amiably and told the boy to return to his work quickly if he still had something to do. After Tang Xiaobao left, the man leaned his face on his hand and asked his daughter what the hell was going on. Huoya became angry with her father and asked what was wrong with Tang Xiaobao when the man reminded her of their family's status and that she was not suitable for him. Mayor Luo Wenbao apologized to his daughter for constantly being absent from home due to work and for not paying enough attention to her. The girl agreed to forgive her father for his selfishness on the condition that he promise her one thing, and he asked what it was. Huoya looked at her dad seriously and said that he should help Tang Xiaobao return to school. After meeting Huoya, our hero again went to the city hospital where his mother was being treated. Sitting on the sofa, Tang Xiaobao was upset because Huoya's father had misunderstood him, as he was there to treat the girl. The guy lay down on the sofa, putting his hands behind his head, and decided to check the system, hoping that it had some kind of surprise for him, because he could no longer fall asleep. The young man activated the system, which immediately offered him the chance to play the lottery, as he had reached the 2nd level of his reputation. The protagonist immediately jumped up from the couch. He was shocked when he saw that he had increased his reputation level so quickly. Licking his lips, Tang Xiaobao was in anticipation of what he would win in the lottery. He hoped that he would get X-ray vision. He was disappointed when he received instant teleportation, a skill that allows him to reach a patient for first aid in an instant. The guy wondered how this skill would be useful to him, and whether it was worth it for him to run and save people's lives when they were in trouble. Our hero's sister was about to tell him something about acupuncture, but his father stopped her and told her not to pester her brother with the topic. When Tang Xiaobao finished his business and wiped the sweat from his forehead, he noticed Huoya and asked what she was doing there. The girl was standing with a bouquet in her hands. The girl replied that she had come to see her aunt, and the boy admitted that he had thought that Huoya had been joking yesterday, but she had come. The girl with pink hair smiled sweetly and answered our hero that she had to come and visit her aunt. Tang Xiaobao's sister noted the wonderful character of her future daughter-in-law and concluded that her elder brother was far from alone, and her father agreed with her. The protagonist turned around and asked his relatives not to whisper, because Huoya could hear everything. It seemed that Huoya had actually heard everything. Her face flushed and she ran away. Tang Xiaobao asked her to wait for him. The guy caught up with her, and in the corridor he told the girl that Huoya had done him a great favor today. Schoolflower asked Tang Xiaobao not to think too much and not to tell her family what was between them, because it was impossible. Perplexed, Tang Xiaobao scratched his head and asked what was impossible and what had happened between them. Huoya began to stutter, claiming that this was not what she meant. Blushing, she told the young man that he would soon be able to return to school to continue his studies, and he hoped that Tang Xiaobao would study diligently. After these words, the girl left. Our hero waved goodbye to her and thanked her, promising that he would study hard. The guy thought that these people needed urgent help, because there shouldn't be such a crowd here, when a whole bunch of impudent, aggressive men burst into the hospital. Ma Ming, the boss of the Kuroshio Club and the owner of the property, threatened Dean Zhang that hell would be a resort for him if anything happened to his only daughter. The The protagonist was outraged when he saw how brazenly this man behaved, while Dean Zhang tried to explain to Ma Ming that he could not save his daughter. Not that he did not want to. Dean Zhang shouted at Tang Xiaobao to come over to him quickly, because he saw this guy as his last hope. Tang Xiaobao was frightened and stuttered as he answered the dean that he couldn't help him in any way because he wasn't a miracle doctor, and he knew he shouldn't get involved with this hot-tempered family. Dean Zhang told Tang Xiaobao that he was under a lot of pressure when he tried to save his mother, so he needed the guy's help. The guy asked Huoya to leave first because he needed to help the dean examine the patient. The girl agreed. The old man put his hand on the young man's shoulder and told Ma Ming that he had found the best doctor who could save his daughter's life. Ma Ming became furious and shouted, "Can just any passerby call himself a doctor?" and asked who Tang Xiaobao thought he was. Dean Zhang said that Xiaobao's mother had a brain hemorrhage and was diagnosed with a fatal condition, but the young man managed to save her. All the hospital staff in white coats who were standing nearby stood up for the boy and said that they could confirm this. A frightened nurse ran into the corridor and screamed, informing Dean Zhang that Ma Xiaofeng's body temperature was dropping. Then Ma Ming agreed to believe our hero, but shouted, warning the guy that this was the first and last time. The worried elderly doctor urged Tang Xiaobao and the others to hurry to the ward because the girl's condition was worsening. Dean Zhang, Tang Xiaobao, and her father entered the room where Ma Xiaofeng was lying, and they all stood around the girl's bed. Dean Zhang asked Tang Xiaobao if there was any way to help the girl, and the boy replied that she needed to be saved. The old man admitted that they had thoroughly examined Ma Xiaofeng and found nothing, and asked the young man if he saw anything. The protagonist clarified that when he said he needed to save her, the guy meant he didn't know if he could do it. Ma Ming, worried about the life of his only daughter, became angry and shouted, asking the young man what he meant by this, and Tang Xiaobao sighed heavily and replied that the girl was not sick, so the general practitioners could not help her, and she had 24 hours to live. The angry father grabbed our hero by the shoulders and shouted, asking if his daughter had been cursed to die. Dr. Zhang asked the man to stop worrying and assured him that Tang Xiaobao was the only one who could save his daughter. The man grabbed his head and panicked. He repeated his daughter's name several times and said that he did not want her to die. The protagonist asked the man to listen to him and stated that he wanted to save his daughter, but first they needed to make a deal. He came closer to the man who had fallen to his knees and said that he was only 60% sure of the correct diagnosis, so the father had to make a decision whether to treat her or not. The man was not pleased when he heard that the young doctor was unsure of the diagnosis and demanded that he not be blamed for anything. Tang Xiaobao asked Ma Ming not to rush, since Xiaofeng would not die today anyway, and let him come back after he thought everything over. The man found the strength to rise from his knees, forbade himself to think about the bad, and shouted that he entrusted his daughter into Xiaobao's hands. The young doctor then asked what would happen to him if something went wrong during Xiaofeng's treatment. Ma Ming closed his eyes and asked him not to worry, and stated that he would not bother him anymore if his daughter died. The man showed Tang Xiaobao his token and declared that with it, all his younger brothers would not target the boy. When Dean Zhang stepped aside, our hero told Ma Ming that his daughter was being haunted by a ghost and would die the next day. Ma Ming was extremely indignant when he heard about the ghost. He looked at the young man with a hint of distrust in his eyes. The guy crossed his arms over his chest and said that he knew Ma Ming wouldn't believe this version, and he himself wouldn't have believed it if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes. The grief-stricken man said that if he had known his daughter was okay, he would not have come to the hospital. Seeing that the man believed him, Tang Xiaobao was stunned and asked if Ma Ming really believed that there were ghosts in this world. The man sat down against the wall and said that, believe it or not, he had seen people catch ghosts before, but the master had died in a car accident. The protagonist noticed that Ma Ming fell apart very easily and said that his behavior did not resemble that of a business tycoon. Business magnate Ma Ming shook the young doctor vigorously by the shoulders and asked why he considered him a fool if he was a real master. The guy felt dizzy and said that the man scared him to death, and said that he still needed some materials to save his daughter. Realizing his guilt, Ma Ming began to nod and bow his head to the boy, claiming that he would do whatever Master Tang Xiaobao said. The boys from the Ma family soon returned and reported to our hero that they had bought all the necessary items and food, and asked what else the master needed. While happily devouring the chicken, Tang Xiaobao asked for 5 more people to be sent to his mother's room, and the guys said they had already done so. The Ma family boys said they would take their leave in that case. Tang Xiaobao asked them to wait a minute, and they stopped. Wiping his mouth, the young doctor said that they would have to answer a few questions so that he could save their boss's daughter. Our hero was petrified with fear when the guys admitted that their boss was just the head of the city's criminal underworld and a developer whose people were killing people. Finally, Tang Xiaobao grabbing the door handle, ordered the guys to take the sick girl home to prepare for treatment. The surprised guys asked if Tang Xiaobao hadn't said earlier that they would be treating Miss Ma at the hospital. The protagonist knew that a patient's familiar environment increased the chance of treatment success by 10%, especially since he didn't believe that Ma Ming's token would save his life. The guy from the Ma family asked his partner not to say stupid things, because a master like Tang Xiaobao had higher manners. The bald-headed young man called his boss and said that the master asked them to take the miss home and was ordered to keep an eye on Tang Xiaobao so that he did not leave them. As the sun was setting, the action took place in Ma Ming's mansion, and he informed Master Bao that the room was ready. The protagonist asked the man to tell everyone to leave and not disturb him when it got dark. He knew that without guards, it would be easier for him to escape if everything did not go according to plan. The guy went into a spacious hall, in the middle of which Ma Xiaofeng was lying on a mat. The girl was sleeping, and Tang Xiaobao sat down next to the patient. The room was quiet. The only annoying sound was the loud ticking of the clock. It struck midnight, and our hero was ready to begin treatment. Tang Xiaobao stood in front of the patient. The girl lay in an unchanged position. Above her body, there was a bright blue aura, like her astral body. The boy turned around and told Ma Ming that he would get nervous if the man stayed there. And Ma Ming remarked that the master was a very good joker. The young doctor turned to face the man and said that he was really nervous because it was his first time. And Ma Ming asked if this was really his first ghost hunt. Ma Ming felt bad because of this. The protagonist tried to calm him down, saying that everything was fine and he would try his best. The protagonist sweated from the strain, looked away, and pursed his lips. They were only halfway through the healing process. Waving his arms, Tang Xiaobao began to shout various spells and call upon the Great One to destroy the ghost as instructed in the commandment. The young doctor decided it was useless when the ghost with horns on its forehead screamed and bared its teeth, remaining completely fine. The ghost only became more enraged when Tang Xiaobao decided to douse him with a bucket of rotten dog blood, and it still didn't work. The ghost started chasing the guy, he screamed, suggesting that he just talk and stop for a second. When the blue ghost grabbed our hero by the neck and began to strangle him, Tang Xiaobao thought that his life was already over. A look of fear appeared on the ghost's face, and her mouth opened wide when she saw Tang Xiaobao begin to emit a bright light. The protagonist sighed heavily. He finally managed to tie up the ghost. He shouted that he would kill her while she was still weak. Tang Xiaobao thrust the magic sword straight into the ghost's mouth, and she only laughed evilly when the guy said that eliminating evil means promoting good. The boy noted the ghost's incredible strength, but said that he would continue to fight and began to swing his sword. The ghost was very frightened and screamed. She looked at Master Xiaobao with horror in her eyes when he began to fight against her more diligently. The protagonist fought so hard against the powerful ghost that his magical glowing sword broke with a crack. The guy started shaking his head from side to side and asking where the ghost had gone, holding the broken sword in his hands. "Business tycoon!" Ma Ming's eyes lit up with admiration, and he clapped his hands and exclaimed that the ghost had been destroyed. The protagonist touched his neck and mentally thanked the talisman he had recently bought and secured there. The first thing the man did was ask Master Tang Xiaobao when his only daughter would wake up. The boy asked his father not to worry. The ghost had been destroyed. All that was left was to do acupuncture, and the girl would wake up. Our young hero certainly began the acupuncture procedure. He inserted the first silver needle into the acupuncture point, but this did not have a quick visible effect. The guy looked at Xiaofeng's face and asked her why she hadn't woken up yet. However, a moment later the girl suddenly opened her eyes, and the guy shouted that Ma Xiaofeng had already woken up. The protagonist screamed when the girl, upon seeing the guy in front of her, suddenly kicked him so hard that Tang Xiaobao flew up to the ceiling. The boy landed on the floor with a thud after the impact, wincing in pain and screaming loudly. Ma Ming immediately ran up and sat down next to the young master, trying to apologize for his daughter, while our hero massaged his tailbone after the fall. Ma Xiaofeng covered her mouth with her hand. She thought she was in trouble when she saw that she had accidentally beaten the master. The girl knelt down in front of our hero and told the gentleman that he was very sorry, she didn't do it on purpose, and asked him to let her give him a massage. Tang Xiaobao smiled and replied that he was fine and had things to do. So, he had to leave now because he was afraid of the girl's cruelty. Ma Xiaofeng still insisted on a massage. She began to massage his shoulders and asked the gentleman not to rush, because she had not yet thanked him. The boy turned his head sharply to the side when the head of the family approached him and asked the young master to stay with them for dinner. Already at dinner, holding a glass of red wine in his hand, a happy Ma Ming promised that he would walk through fire if his daughter's savior needed anything. The protagonist, also holding a glass of wine, asked the man not to call him master because Xiao Bao suits him just fine. The man hit his chest and shouted that they would then become brothers, and from now on Tong Xiaobao would be his sworn brother. Ma Xiaofeng was clearly against it. The girl jumped up from her chair and shouted at her father that he could not call Xiaobao his brother. Our hero felt uneasy around them. He thought that Ma Xiaofeng was definitely his daughter, since she had such a character. Ma Ming yelled back at his daughter, asking why she cared whether Tong Xiaobao would become his brother or not, and what she was even thinking about. The reason was that the girl had already fallen in love with the master. She grabbed her reddened face, smiled, and confessed it. At that moment, the main character just took a sip of water, and all this water ended up on the girl's face due to the unexpected news. Tang Xiaobao felt extremely uncomfortable in this house. He thought that what happened was very bad for him. But the incident with the water did not push the girl away. On the contrary, Ma Xiaofeng licked her lips and admitted that she was falling more and more in love with the master. Ma Ming asked if his daughter was really not joking this time. She replied that she was as serious as ever, which shocked Xiao Bao even more. The man was only glad to hear this news. He joyfully shouted how great it was that his daughter fell in love with the master. He patted the guy on the shoulder and said that since his daughter was in love with him, they should get married as soon as possible so that Ma Ming could transfer all his property to him and retire. Ma Xiaofeng asked her father not to say that, because she knew what he thought of those bitches and what he might do when they got married. The indignant protagonist asked if they were finished yet, and said that he was too young to get married already. Taking this as an insult, Ma Xiaofeng asked the boy if she was so bad that Tang Xiaobao hated her. Waving his arms in front of him, the boy tried to justify himself to Miss Feng, claiming that he simply didn't deserve her. The girl became even more angry and screamed, asking if the master was saying this to reject her, and if he really didn't like her at all. Xiaobao said that he liked her, and Xiaofeng asked why he didn't marry her then, and whether he thought she was not cute enough. The protagonist screamed, trying to stop the girl, and declared that he liked her, but feelings were also important. The angry girl put her hands on her hips and suggested that they first develop their feelings, and then she would make sure that Xiaobao would marry her voluntarily. Tang Xiaobao was stunned when Ma Ming announced that he would give him $10 million to improve his life. The boy asked the man not to scare him like that and said that he did not need this money, and Ma Ming suggested that this amount was too small for the master. Ma Ming asked if he really didn't need the money. Tang Xiaobao replied that he wouldn't take a single cent. He only needed one favor. Ma Xiaofeng intervened in their conversation and said that they would help the guy, but for this he had to accept the money. Tang Xiaobao asked him to listen and stated that he was still a high school student, and he was expelled from school and he needed to go back there because his parents wanted him to. Ma Ming assured the young doctor that everything was fine and the boy did not need to worry about it, and asked him to leave it to him. The girl slammed her hands on the table and screamed that, of course, going back to school was important. But if anyone touched her husband, she would feed them to the dogs. The main character felt too uncomfortable. He thought that this woman was too scary, and he needed to get out of here. Tang Xiaobao scratched his head and said that he thought it was time for him to go back after everything that had happened here. Ma Xiaofeng came up behind him and put her hands on his shoulders, pressing herself against him, and asked why he had to leave in the middle of the night. The protagonist hesitated. He wanted to explain why he should leave, but he couldn't find the right words. The guy was unable to escape from Ma Ming and his family's mansion. Our hero had to spend the rest of the night in bed in the guest bedroom. When the young master managed to fall asleep, the door to his room quietly opened and a girl's hand appeared. The main character immediately jumped out of bed when he heard a strange sound. He got scared and screamed, asking who it was. It turned out that it was Ma Xiaofeng. The girl came to her lover in a revealing nightgown, smiling coquettishly. When asked what she was doing there, the girl said that she had come to warm the guy's bed, and stuck out her tongue when he replied that it was summer, and there was no need for that. Tang Xiaobao told Ma Xiaofeng that he had the air conditioner on, and the persistent girl then suggested that the guy was lonely. The main character got down on his knees and began to beg the girl that he just wanted to get a good night's sleep, so let him rest. Indignantly, the girl asked if he didn't need her company and said that they could chat all night long. Trying to protect himself from her, our young hero declared that she would still not get his heart, even if she got his body. He looked at Ma Xiaofeng with fear as she approached and asked if he would regret his decision later. The girl admitted that she was actually nervous, since she hadn't spent the night with men, and wished the guy good night. The protagonist sighed with relief when she left him alone, and he decided to get up and lock the door to his bedroom. The next day, Ma Xiaofeng invited our hero to go with her, and he asked the girl where she was going. Ma Xiaofeng replied that, in fact, her future mother-in-law was currently in the hospital, so she couldn't help but visit her. After some time, the girl was already saying goodbye to her aunt and uncle. Our hero's father said goodbye to her and asked her to come again. After she left, Tang Xiaobao smiled widely and laughed. He was glad that he was finally free from Ma Xiaofeng. The protagonist said that he just wanted to go to the toilet and asked his relatives what Ma Xiaofeng told them, and they became indignant. The boy's sister asked how he had the nerve to continue to refuse Xiaofeng, and Tang Xiaobao asked why she spoke to him like that. The girl explained that Huoya was beautiful, but Ma Xiaofeng loved the guy more, especially since Huoya was from a second-generation family of officials. Tang Xiaobao explained that Xiaofeng was the only daughter of the biggest property owner in the city, and her father wanted them to marry so he could take over all of his family's property. The sister snorted and asked why her brother had suddenly become so popular with girls, since he wasn't that handsome. Their conversation was interrupted when someone knocked on the door. Tang Xiaobao asked who it was and said that he was already on his way. The guy was stunned when he saw a man with glasses at the door. It was Principal Dan from his school. He asked why he was there. Dean Zhang came with him, and the man asked the old man if this was really the little doctor he had told him about. Dean Zhang praised our hero, saying that his acupuncture technique was amazing and could even help cure the director's illness. Director Deng said that he heard the dean bragging, so he became interested in Tang Xiaobao and asked if he could help him. The guy felt awkward and admitted that his skills weren't perfect yet, but he was willing to try to help the director. The man with glasses replied that this was not good and the guy should be confident in himself. Tang Xiaobao said that he would try to be more confident. Principal Dan praised our hero's youthful spirit and said he had heard the boy had been expelled from school. Sweating with excitement, the protagonist was surprised to learn that Director Dan was unaware of this and asked him about it. The man said that he only found out about this yesterday when he returned, and had already made inquiries so the young man could return to class tomorrow. The protagonist was delighted to be reinstated in his studies and thanked the school principal for bringing him back. The school principal noticed that his student did not look surprised and assumed it was because Liu Qiang had not been punished. The man promised Tang Xiaobao that the bad apples in their education system would be found and severely punished. Then the protagonist's eyes lit up with joy. He opened his mouth wide in surprise and thanked the director once again. Suddenly, Ma Ming and his men appeared at the hospital. He praised Teacher Deng for his good work and said that this is how it is done. The young man waved hello to Mr. Ma and asked what he was doing at the hospital today. The man said that he had gone into town this morning and had just returned, and was here to thank the boy and check on his mother. Our hero's mom and dad were noticeably wary, but in unison they thanked Mr. Ma for his kindness. The business magnate shook the school principal's hand and asked how old Teacher Dan was doing. The surprised school principal asked Ma Ming why he, a famous billionaire, still considered a man his teacher. Ma Ming replied that a teacher is for life, so he would consider Principal Deng his father for the rest of his life. The man with glasses smiled and said that Ma Ming was one of his most beloved students in his entire life, but he had taught him little. The business magnate replied that Principal Dan taught his students to be human beings, which is much more important than knowledge. Director Deng asked Tang Xiaobao if he had saved Ma Ming, and the young man replied that he had treated his daughter's illness. This pleased the man in glasses. He smiled, closing his eyes, and told the young doctor that this was excellent. It was time for the man to return to work at school. He told the boys about this and said that he would leave them alone. Dean Zhang patted the school principal on the shoulder and said that he would write to the man again later. Our hero's parents noticed how slowly Director Dan walked, because they didn't know that he suffered from arthrosis. After some time, Ma Ming, who was still in the hospital, asked Tang Xiaobao if the director hadn't returned yet. The main character told the guy that Director Dan told him that he would continue to investigate his case. It seems Ma Ming was aware of the boy's case. He said that the offenders deserved punishment, and they cannot get away with it. Tang Xiaobao awkwardly scratched the back of his head and thanked Mr. Ma for his help. But Mr. Ma replied that it was a trivial matter and not worth mentioning. Our hero's older sister appeared behind him. Ma Ming asked if she was his sister, and she introduced herself as Xiao Kao. The man stroked the girl's head and said that her brother had saved his daughter, and she had fallen in love with him and was now her daughter-in-law, and he handed her a gift. The girl was delighted and thanked her uncle. She told him that her daughter-in-law had been here recently and she liked her. Mr. Ma Ming warned Xiao Kao that this was not charity, so she would have to help in exchange for this gift. Xiao Kao was only too happy to help her uncle, and the protagonist, who was watching them from the side, realized that he had been betrayed. Afterwards, the little sister whispered to her older brother that Uncle Ma had given her a card, not cash, and that she needed to check how much money was in it. When Xiao Kao checked the card, she ran to her brother in shock, waving her arms and shouting that there was a whole million in the bank account. The father, who was also sitting in the room, was perplexed and asked his youngest daughter what other million they were talking about. The stunned girl showed her father the red envelope and said that it was given to her by her brother's father-in-law, Mr. Ma Ming. Dad wasn't thrilled with the gift and strictly ordered Xiao Chao to return the envelope to Ma Ming, as she couldn't get everything for free. Tang Xiaobao crossed his arms and said that Ma Ming would not take the envelope back and that the money could improve their family's life. The father felt awkward. He doubted that this was appropriate, but the daughter nodded her head sharply, insisting that this was wonderful, and in return she only needed to be kind to her daughter-in-law. When the phone in Tang Xiaobao's pocket rang, Xiao Cao immediately began to question who it was, assuming it was her daughter-in-law calling. It turned out that it really was her. The guy told her that they were not dating, and the girl insisted that she would pick him up in a minute. The main character felt uneasy when Ma Xiaofeng confronted him with the fact that they would have dinner after the movie, and she had something else planned. Xiao Cao was angry at her elder brother. She shouted, asking how dare he do this to a girl, hanging up the phone. Tang Xiaobao asked his younger sister why she always protected Ma Xiaofeng with open arms. Soon Ma Xiaofeng burst into the room. She happily waved her hand and asked her uncle, aunt, and younger sister how they were doing. Dissatisfied, Tang Xiaobao asked how she got here so quickly. Ma hugged him and said that she came to invite her beloved to dinner. The protagonist was delighted when he saw Huoya also enter the room. He thought that the girl could help him. Tang Xiaobao began to wink at the pink-haired girl, so that she would understand his hint that he needed to be saved without words. The guy walked up to Huoya, hugged her, and announced that she was his girlfriend and that they were going on a date that evening. Madame Ma Xiaofeng glared at her lover and was a little taken aback when she heard that he had a girlfriend. Huoya understood Tang Xiaobao's hint and asked him who the girl was, and he replied that she was her friend. Offended by these words, Ma Xiaofeng, who thought completely differently, asked our hero if they were really just friends. The protagonist hugged Huoya and asked Xiaofeng to let him go, because he already had someone he liked. Then Ma Xiaofeng asked if Tang Xiaobao and Huoya were already married, and the guy replied that they were not yet married. Miss Ma said that she still had a chance then, and was not going to give up, and Huoya replied that she hoped the girl could impress Tang Xiaobao. The love triangle was broken by a worried Dean Zhong, who burst into the room and shouted at Tang Xiaobao to come quickly after him. The elderly doctor said that the woman had suffered severe bleeding during childbirth, and they were unable to stop it. Tang Xiaobao felt awkward, and said that although he was an adult, it was hardly a good idea for him to be the one delivering the baby. Ma Xiaofeng and Huoya were stunned. They didn't understand what the hell was going on that Tang Xiaobao would be delivering the baby. Dean Zhang replied that he knew it was hard for the young doctor, but without the boy's help, the woman would not survive the day. The protagonist looked at the pink-haired girl, who told him to hurry because saving lives was important. Ma Xiaofeng was also in favor of her lover helping the woman. She began to push him in the back, assuring him that there was nothing wrong with it. Tang Xiaobao was energized and decided to help the woman. He walked forward, calling for Dean Zhang to follow him. Concerned relatives had already gathered near the woman's room. Someone shouted for them to clear the way because the doctor had arrived. The man asked the doctors to hurry up to help the woman. He thought that an experienced doctor had arrived, but he screamed, asking Dean Zhang if he was really making fun of him when he saw a teenager in front of him, and not a miracle doctor. Dean Zhang didn't listen to him. He shouted for the man to step aside, for the doctor to enter the room. He tried to object. Concerned about the patient's condition, the elderly doctor shouted, calling our hero to follow him. The protagonist abruptly opened the doors of the ward to examine and help the woman, who was rapidly losing blood. There was a patient lying on a hospital bed, writhing in pain and screaming, her whole face covered in beads of sweat. When Tang Xiaobao picked up the silver needle and looked at the patient, something about her condition made our hero very wary. But he immediately began the procedure, piercing the woman's acupuncture point with a silver needle to stop the bleeding. When the procedure was completed, the guy sighed heavily, wiped the sweat from his forehead and said that the bleeding had stopped. The rest was up to the doctors. After some time, a child's cry was heard from the ward. The man perked up, assuming that the child had already been born. A nurse came out of the room and congratulated the man, saying that they were both safe and that he had given birth to a healthy baby boy. The man burst into tears of happiness as he took his newborn son into his arms and thanked Dean Zhang and the others. The protagonist smiled and replied to the happy father that a doctor should save lives and help those suffering. When the pink-haired girl approached the boy, she told him that Ma Xiaofeng had already left the hospital. This made the young man happy. He invited the girl to leave together and said that he would be glad if she accompanied him to dinner. Huoya told him to forget about eating and to give her acupuncture treatment next time, because the pain in her body was not subsiding. The protagonist happily agreed to help. He said that he was always free, so let Huoya call when she needed help. The pink-haired girl said goodbye to Tang Xiaobao and said that it was time for her to leave, and he smiled back at her. It was already dark outside, but the young doctor Tang Xiaobao was still spending time in the city hospital, sitting on the sofa in the corridor. He was delighted when the system notified him that Xiaobao could play the lottery again, as he had reached the 3rd level of reputation. But then the system said that reputation was not enough to play the lottery and the guy needed to continue working well. The next day, when the sun was shining brightly outside, the action took place at Tang Xiaobao's school, where he was able to return. A worried classmate ran up to him and shouted, asking if what had become known about him and Huoya was a joke. A puzzled Tang Xiaobao, who was sitting at his desk, asked his classmate if something had happened between him and Huoya. The stunned student showed Tang Xiaobao the screen of his smartphone and shouted for the boy to look at the news himself. The protagonist picked up his classmate's phone and stared at the screen, which said that the ice goddess and the swindler toad were dating. Tang Xiaobao was angry when he was called a toad, he shouted, asking if there was such a beautiful toad like him. A classmate demanded an explanation from the guy. He asked if Tang Xiaobao and Huoya were really that serious. The guy replied that if he believed it, then it was true. But otherwise it was a lie, and he didn't want to tell anyone else anything. The schoolboy became angry with our hero and shouted, calling on the rest of his classmates to attack him. As Tang Xiaobao sat reading, he remembered that he hadn't had time to use the winnings from the newbie gift package. So he decided to do it now. The boy was amazed when the pages of the book began to turn by themselves, and what's more, he was able to remember all this information. When our young hero walked out into the school courtyard, he was met by a gang of students led by a guy who asked Tang Xiaobao if he had already returned. Li Hao, the student council president, adjusted his glasses and said that Tang Xiaobao would have to tell everyone right now what made him worthy of Huoya's attention. Tang Xiaobao chuckled and asked if the guy was asking for trouble, because there was hardly anyone here that our hero should be afraid of. There was a deathly silence as everyone stared in silence at our hero, as he asked whoever wanted to join Li Hao to step forward. Looking askance at the student council president, Tang Xiaobao asked Li Hao what made him hesitate and pick a fight with the guy over Huoya. The student council leader was offended by the boy's words and shouted, demanding that Tang Xiaobao repeat who the weakling was. The protagonist asked the guy with glasses if he was having problems with Muji, the guy with glasses' girlfriend. The boy shouted that Tang Xiaobao could talk nonsense as much as he wanted, but he was still a loser who failed all his school tests. Our hero crossed his arms over his chest, smiled, and replied that he had deliberately failed the exams, if Lu Hao meant grades. The student council president assumed Xiaobao was making fun of him, and said he would run 10 laps around the sports ground naked if the boy passed the test. Tang Xiaobao replied that it was okay to run around naked, but if he passed the next exam, Lu Hao would shout that he was a pig in the cafeteria. Lu Hao shouted back that if Tang Xiaobao failed the exam, he would have to break up with Huoya and also shout that he was a pig. The protagonist accepted the challenge and told the council president to remember that he himself forced the guy to do this. The guy with glasses turned around and walked away, shouting at the end that they would just wait and see who was the winner. A worried Huoya approached our hero and asked how he could compare his grades with Li Hao's. The protagonist yawned widely and suggested to the pink-haired girl that they discuss this during lunch. When Tang Xiaobao and Huoya arrived at the school cafeteria together, the people around them started shouting that their goddess was having an affair with Xiaobao. Our hero felt at ease at the dinner table, eating calmly while Huoya blushed and felt awkward. The girl glanced at him sideways and accused him of being cunning. She asked how he was going to compete with Li Hao. When she suggested that the guy was just going to cheat on her, Tang Xiaobao smirked and suggested that she just wait and watch the show. Suddenly, Liu Qiang walked up to the table, slammed his hand on it, and shouted that he heard that Tang Xiaobao had a bet with Li Hao and that he wanted to make a bet too. Looking with disdain at his main enemy, the protagonist asked the guy what he wanted to bet. Liu Qiang said he wanted to bet $10,000. Knowing that our hero was in trouble, Xiaobao offered him to bet $50,000 if he wanted to play a real game of chance. The guy looked at Tang Xiaobao with a look full of hatred when our hero began to tease and provoke him. Tang Xiaobao looked down at the student and asked if he was going to place a bet or if he was just there to joke around. Enraged, Liu Qiang agreed to bet $50,000 and shouted that Tang Xiaobao would be obliged to carry out his orders if he lost. The main character showed him a hand gesture, smiled, and agreed to the terms of the guy with white hair. Tang Xiaobao walked towards the exit of the dining room and called Huoya to follow him. The girl looked at the guy in confusion. The disciples who witnessed this dispute suggested that Tang Xiaobao was crazy to agree to such a deal. One of the students, staring at his phone, was about to post a video he had just recorded to the school group. The The boy posted a video on the school channel with an angry Liu Qiang and our hero on the cover, and a provocative title. The next action still took place at the school where our hero studied. He went to the library. There was whispering behind the guy's back. The girl said that he looked both crazy and attractive when he leafed through a book. The main character was preparing for the upcoming exam. He stood and flipped through the textbook, quickly absorbing all the knowledge. Tang Xiaobao concentrated on reading, his eyes fixed on the book. The only sound he could hear was the rustling of the pages turning quickly. The guy smiled and slammed the textbook shut, because a couple of minutes were enough for him to read it completely and absorb the material. He started complaining about the stupid system that raised his reputation to the 4th level with the acquisition of knowledge of pharmacology. When the phone in the guy's pocket vibrated, he took it out and saw that Huoya had written to him, asking how he was doing. The guy replied that he didn't regret meeting and curing the girl, and invited her on a date, and she arranged to meet in the school garden. When they met, the school flower asked Tang Xiaobao where he had been all day, and he replied that he had been reading in the library. A worried Huoya asked if he could surpass Li Hao since it was a monthly exam and the guy only studied in the library. Tang Xiaobao waved his hand and asked her not to worry about it, and asked if the girl was free tonight. The pink-haired girl became angry and reminded Tang Xiaobao that this was the college entrance exam, and he should focus on his studies. Tang Xiaobao once again asked her not to worry and suggested going to Huoya's home, since she had previously asked the guy for help. The girl blushed and replied that her father was home tonight, so it wasn't a very good idea. Then the young man invited her to go to the hotel and rent a room, because it wouldn't take much time. At this time, the student council director was nearby, and he gritted his teeth in anger when he heard that Huoya and Tang Xiaobao wanted to rent a hotel room. He immediately called his cousin and asked her to come over because Huoya, whom he had been ordered to follow, was going to meet some bastard that evening. In the evening, Huoya and our hero met in a hotel room. The girl lay down on the bed and asked him to begin the procedure. Holding a needle in his hand, the guy asked her how he would pierce her skin if the girl decided to keep her clothes on. The pink-haired girl's cheeks turned red, and she asked Tang Xiaobao if she should take off her clothes. The protagonist sweated from embarrassment and replied that there was no need to do that. It was enough to show him her belly. The heroine lifted her t-shirt so that the young doctor could insert a needle into her stomach and asked if that would be okay. Tang Xiaobao was startled when, a second later, someone began knocking persistently on the door. The scared-to-death young man asked Huoya if this was her father and suggested that they were now in big trouble. The pink-haired girl also began to get nervous, but she reminded Tang Xiaobao of his own words about what is clean and what is dirty. The main character still dared to open the door and let the man who was knocking into the hotel room. He saw an angry young man standing on the threshold, surrounded by a crowd of strong men. It was Zheng Dong, the 20-year-old son of the deputy mayor. Leaning against the doorframe, Tang Xiaobao put his hands in his pockets and told the boys that he thought they were in the wrong place. Our young hero was startled when an angry Zheng Dong pushed him and shouted at him to get out of his way. The guy burst into the hotel room and immediately shouted Huoya's name. The girl looked at the young man in bewilderment. She was surprised when she saw Zheng Dong. She asked what he was doing in Tongjiang, because the guy should now be in the city of Bangzhong. Without explaining to the girl how he ended up there, the worried guy asked if everything was okay with her. Snorting, the pink-haired girl replied that she was fine, but demanded to know what Zheng Dong was doing there. Zheng Dong glanced sideways at the protagonist and called him a very impudent guy, and asked how he dared to touch Chen's girlfriend. Tang Xiaobao replied that he was simply treating Huoya, and even if they did something, it was none of his business. The deputy mayor's son became even more angry and shouted, asking Tang Xiaobao if he was seeking death. Our hero was taken aback when Huoya jumped forward to defend him, and asked Zheng Dong if he could imagine the consequences for himself after tarnishing her reputation. Showing concern, the boy asked the girl how he would explain this to Chen Xiao if something happened to her. The girl, angry with him, ordered him to get out of her way because it was his concern and she did not care about it. An angry Huoya suddenly grabbed our young hero by the arm and dragged him out of that hotel room. The protagonist, accompanied by the school flower, walked down the hotel corridor, and Zheng Dong remained standing and gritting his teeth, looking after them. When the boys went outside, Tang Xiaobao asked the annoyed Huoya what was going on with her boyfriend named Chen. The pink-haired girl glanced irritably at our hero and replied that he didn't need to know, since it was none of his business. Huoya continued to walk silently and sulk at the guy, who wondered if he had really fallen in love with this girl. When the protagonist was left alone on the street, Zheng Dong caught up with him and grabbed him by the shoulder, along with his retinue. Tang Xiaobao looked down at the angry man with a smirk on his face and asked if he was going to initiate a conflict. The son of the deputy mayor of the city also grinned and boldly answered our hero that yes, and asked what was so special about it. The main character warned the boy that there were a lot of surveillance cameras here, and he didn't want the boy to get into trouble later. So angry that the veins on his face stood out, Zhengdong asked Tang Xiaobao not to worry about it and proposed to fight. Then our hero decided to use the magic system to avoid the fight and teleport. The system asked to prepare for teleportation. Tang Xiaobao was very scared when he heard someone else's loud shout, telling the boys to stop what they were doing. It was Wei Bin from the Crime Investigation Department. Our hero thought, isn't this the man whose wife was dying in childbirth? The guy who came with Zhengdong was surprised when he saw the man. He asked the leader why Wei Bing was here. When the protagonist noticed the elder's appearance, he immediately canceled the teleportation in the system in order to stay here. Wei Bing walked up to Tang Xiaobao and asked his little brother what happened here. The man looked worried. The guy advised the man to get out of there so as not to get hurt, because those young men wanted to hurt him. And Wei Bin replied that he didn't want to be left out. Wanting to stand up for the young man who had been so kind to his family, Wei Bing approached Zhengdong and asked what he was doing there. Zhengdong advised Wei Bing not to interfere, since Tang Xiaobao dared to take Chen Xiao's woman to the hotel. Wei Bing asked our hero if the guy was lying, and Tang Xiaobao replied that it was true, but he did it for a medical procedure. The crime scene officer closed his eyes and told the guy he was being too brazen. The protagonist was confused. He thought that there was no point in explaining anything more to him, because even Wei Bing did not believe him. It turned out that these words were not addressed to him. Wei Bing shouted at Zhengdong to go away and not bother little brother Xiaobao, otherwise he would not spare him. Zhengdong looked at the officer from under his brows and asked if he was really willing to take the hit for this child. Wei Bing asked Zhengdong if he had forgotten his profession, and reminded him that he was obliged to arrest a criminal if he encountered a violation of the law. The deputy mayor's son had gone quiet, and his henchman was already quite frightened when the officer asked if Zhengdong would like to stay for a cup of tea. Gritting his teeth in anger, Zhengdong wanted to say something back to the officer, but he stopped himself, knowing that he might get into trouble. The guy turned around and left, calling his subordinates to follow him, and said that he would see what the officer would say when Chen Xiao accused him. A stunned Tang Xiaobao asked Wei Bing who he was and why they were so afraid of him, and the man admitted that he was a policeman. The protagonist's mouth opened wide in surprise upon hearing this, and Wei Bin clarified that he worked in the city crime bureau. The guy said that Chen would now have a score to settle with the man, so he was in his debt. The officer replied that it was the other way around because Tang Xiaobao had saved his wife and son. Curious schoolchildren crowded around the officer and our hero, and the man ordered the crowd to get out of here. Officer Wei Bin patted our hero on the shoulder and took him aside, admitting to the guy that he wanted to ask him something. The man hugged the young man and invited him to go to the establishment to buy him a drink and have a conversation at the same time. At the bar, Wei Bing said that the director said that Tang Xiaobao was a miracle doctor, and he replied that he had studied massage and acupuncture and had some experience in pediatrics and gynecology. Wei Bin asked the young doctor if he knew anything about diabetes. The unexpected question so disconcerted our hero that he choked on his drink and spat it all out on the officer. The young man looked at the officer with eyes wide with shock and wanted to ask the man if he had this disease, but stopped. The policeman awkwardly scratched his face and immediately assured his brother that everything was fine and that his old man had this disease. The protagonist assumed that Wei Bing wanted him to help his uncle who had diabetes. Wei Bing said that he knew that diabetes was difficult to cure, but Tang Xiaobao was a miracle doctor, and he couldn't help but ask for help. Tang Xiaobao told the officer that he wasn't sure about that, but that didn't mean his uncle had no chance of recovery. These words encouraged the police officer, who immediately asked the boy how sure he was that his uncle could be saved. The guy said that if the patient's condition is not serious, he can be cured with acupuncture and medicinal herbs in 3 days. Overjoyed, Wei Bing said that it was wonderful, and he didn't know how to thank the guy if his treatment method worked. In honor of this good news, Tang Xiaobao and the officer clinked glasses and proposed to drink to their health in unison. After dinner, the protagonist decided to take a walk around the city alone, thinking about how dark the Baki River was. Tang Xiaobao was inspired by the picturesque views of his city, and even decided that he would later read several books of poetry. The young miracle doctor walked up to the fence and leaned against it, sighed heavily, and looked at the river once more. The boy turned his wary gaze back when he heard someone shout his name loudly. Angered, the protagonist turned around and asked who the man was who was bothering him while he was enjoying nature. It turned out to be Lu Qiang and his gang of guys. He said that he was sure that this back was familiar to him. The protagonist pretended it wasn't him, and said that Tang Xiaobao had gone in that direction, and they could still catch up with him if they hurried. Enraged, Liu Qiang asked who Tang Xiaobao was trying to fool, and he hiccuped and stuttered as he stated that he, a boy from the best school in the county, wanted him dead. Tang Xiaobao could hardly contain his laughter when he heard the boy's speech and realized that the man in front of him was simply a stutterer. The guy with snow-white hair shouted that this young man was just asking for a beating and called on the others to beat him up. The schoolboy's fist whistled past our hero's face, but Tang Xiaobao remained completely calm and did not move. Tang Xiaobao simply used instant teleportation and disappeared in an instant when Liu Qiang tried to pounce on him. The boy ran towards our hero but didn't notice that Tang Xiaobao had already disappeared, and so the schoolboy ran straight into the fence. The tough guys who came with their boss were scared when they saw that Liu Qiang was about to get into trouble. The protagonist smirked and concluded that it looked like he would have to settle scores with Liu Qiang after he passed the monthly exams. After Tang Xiaobao went to the hospital, he asked his mother if it was true that she was supposed to be discharged tomorrow. Our hero's father said that tomorrow they would buy a lot of goodies to celebrate during a home dinner. Tang Xiaobao smiled and supported his father's idea. The boy was visibly happy that his mother had finally recovered and would be returning home. When it was already dark outside, the main character left the hospital grounds and went for a walk. He walked and sighed heavily. The young miracle doctor, with his hands in his pockets, calmly walked down the street, looking at the full moon in the night sky. The guy decided to test the system's capabilities and used teleportation again to instantly find himself in another place. The protagonist complained of feeling like he was flying, and after the whistle he found himself hanging by his jacket from a bare tree. The branch snapped with a crash and the boy fell face down on the asphalt. He yelped in fear and pain as he fell down. When Tang Xiaobao stood up, he looked at his hands and realized that he needed more practice to use teleportation properly. Suddenly, in the middle of an empty night street, the young man noticed some strange whistling. A puzzled Tang Xiaobao looked up at the sky and wondered what that mysterious sound was. The protagonist's eyes widened in shock when, a moment later, a man fell to the ground right in front of him. Frightened, the young doctor shouted for this man, whoever he was, to leave right now. Otherwise, he would get into trouble. A mysterious man in a monk's robe and long hair shouted, asking whose dog it was that was urinating in the street. The guy was stunned to hear the man speak like a human because he had a suspicion that he was a ghost. The man took a step closer to the young man and said that it didn't matter who he was. The only thing that mattered was that he had found the artifact that was on Tang Xiaobao. The protagonist jumped back and once again advised the man to leave now, otherwise it would be bad if Tang Xiaobao hurt him. But a strong, tall stranger grabbed the young doctor by the jacket and shouted, demanding that the guy give him this artifact. The man opened the boy's jacket and was surprised to see that the artifact hanging around his neck was glowing green. Taking a closer look at the pendant on the boy's neck, the stranger saw that the artifact had already recognized our hero as its owner. The main character was pierced by a strong fear. He did not understand what kind of person was in front of him and how he was able to see the amulet at first glance. A suspicion crept into Tang Xiaobao's mind and he immediately asked the man if he was an immortal from above. The stranger was stunned when he heard this question. He did not expect that the young man could see such things. Tang Xiaobao's eyes immediately lit up with delight, and he asked if the immortal could teach him some techniques or give him a couple of pills. The man crossed his arms over his chest, sighed heavily, and admitted that he was immortal but had been reduced to a mortal, so he had nothing to give. The protagonist quietly replied to the stranger that such incidents made him feel sorry for the immortals. The stranger became angry and towered over Tang Xiaobao, shouting, asking if he was looking down on him from above, since in the past he had been in heaven and everyone had praised him. Tang Xiaobao smirked, knowing that now that he was a miracle doctor, no matter if you were a ghost or an immortal, if you had an illness, he had to treat it properly. The former immortal turned red with rage and shouted, asking the young doctor why he was staring at him like that. The protagonist noticed that something was wrong with the stranger and that he was sick, which he immediately told the man out loud. The immortal's eyes sparkled and he admitted that he was ill because he had run out of spiritual energy, and asked if Tang Xiaobao could help him with this. Our young hero threw up his hands, shook his head, and replied that he could not help the former immortal with this problem. The man admitted that hundreds of years had already passed, but he still had not acquired an immortal soul, and did not even know how much longer he would remain in the mortal world. Full of confidence, the boy smiled and told the immortal that if he didn't know how to do it now, it didn't mean he couldn't help him in the future. In order not to delude himself with false hope, the man immediately asked the young man if he was lying to him. The protagonist smiled and assured the immortal that he was certainly not lying to him, and was ready to cure him in exchange for the elixir. The man wandering through the mortal world hit himself on the chest and replied that there was no problem with it, because it was just an elixir. Tang Xiaobao's eyes lit up and he asked the man if he could give him a few things, such as some magical treasure. The stranger became angry again and shouted, asking if he really thought that the magical treasures were some big heads of cabbage. He said that he couldn't count on Tang Xiaobao for everything, but he would return, said goodbye, and began to rise into the air, raising dust from the ground. Right before Tang Xiaobao's astonished eyes, the immortal stranger began to rise above the ground, his feet already hovering in the air. The immortal flew up with a roar, his body surrounded by a bright blue cloud. And Tang Xiaobao was delighted by this sight. Tang Xiaobao's emotions immediately changed to disappointment and bewilderment, when, a second later, the immortal fell face down back onto the ground with a whoosh. The guy decided to just leave because the immortal was so cool 3 seconds ago. And then he noticed the glowing object. The main character became curious about this mysterious object on the ground that emits such a mesmerizing light. When the young man came closer and squatted down to examine the artifact more closely, he immediately realized that it was a ring. When Tang Xiaobao put on the ring, he immediately received a notification from the system, apologizing that the work was not possible at the current reputation level. The protagonist realized that he was looking at a spatial ring, and he wanted to test the new artifact first by closing the notification from the system. The guy got angry and threw the jar of earth that he wanted to shove into the ring, when the system again refused to activate the artifact. Tang Xiaobao calmed down when he looked at the spatial ring more closely and noticed that there was something inside the decoration. The main character looked inside and saw 2 objects. One of them was a rake, and the second was an envelope with a letter. He glanced sideways at the immortal and thought that he didn't expect that this man was the second eldest brother of the 8 covenants. Tang Xiaobao smirked and thought that he needed to go and raise his reputation level so that he could finally use the ring. The next day, when the sun was shining brightly outside, our young hero went to school. In the classroom, Tang Xiaobao was completely alone. As he entered the room, the boy thought that the exams would begin today. Huoya met him in the office and asked him why he continued to smile despite the fact that exams were about to begin. The confident young miracle doctor closed his eyes, asked the girl not to worry, and said that he had been prepared for the exams for a long time. The pink-haired girl turned her back to Tang Xiaobao and said that she didn't understand why he agreed to the deal with him. The flower of the school froze and opened her eyes wide in surprise when the protagonist admitted that he did this only for her. Huoya closed her eyes, trying to contain her anger. The veins on her face and arms bulged with anger. She thought that Tang Xiaobao was trying to play a joke on her. When all the students had gathered at the appointed time, the teacher approached the teacher's desk and announced that the exam had already begun. There was silence in the classroom. The only sound was the ticking of the clock. The main character was sitting at his desk, and Huoya was sitting in front of him. Tang Xiaobao was writing something down and simultaneously looking sideways at his enemies. He thought that the time would come when Liu Qiang and Li Hao would lick his heels. Soon, Liu Qiang approached our hero in the schoolyard and asked if he had already prepared the money, since the exam results would be ready soon. The ash-haired boy, accompanied by his new girlfriend Wang Jing and several of his friends, took a step closer to Tang Xiaobao. Tang Xiaobao smirked and told the guy that he had a way for him to raise this amount of money if Liu Qiang didn't have $50,000. Wang Jing thought that her ex-boyfriend Tang Xiaobao had already lost, and it was all over, and she didn't understand why he was still trying to do anything. Liu Qiang turned and left, calling his retinue to follow him, and accused our hero of being insolent. But he would see what the guy would say later. Huoya approached Tang Xiaobao and asked the young man if he was truly confident of winning this argument. The protagonist asked the girl not to worry, and offered to find a place for acupuncture if she was free today. The pink-haired girl crossed her arms over her chest, turned around abruptly, and angrily told Tang Xiaobao that it was impossible. Soon all the children gathered in the classroom again. The teacher, holding a sheet of paper in his hand, said that he would now announce the results of the exam. The protagonist grinned when the teacher loudly announced that he had taken the honorable first place with a total score of 706. All of his classmates' mouths were open in surprise because they didn't expect the loser Tang Xiaobao to be the winner. The class split into 2 groups who began arguing with each other, some accusing Tang Xiaobao of cheating, while others were happy that he had won. One of Tang Xiaobao's classmates was amazed and asked the boy if he had taken any pills to be able to win first place. The main character decided not to answer his friend. He simply smiled smugly and crossed his arms over his chest, shrugging his shoulders. Huoya looked at Tang Xiaobao suspiciously and asked him how he managed to do this. Tang Xiaobao patted his chest and proudly told his pink-haired classmate that it was very simple. He was simply a genius. The girl was indifferent to the guy's statement. She didn't believe him, turned away, and replied that he didn't think so. Our hero's classmate looked out the window and then, with stunned eyes, shouted to Tang Xiaobao that Li Hao was down there. With his shoulders squared, our young hero walked towards the exit of the office and said that it was time to take the jackpot from the student council director. Li Hao was very angry as he walked through the schoolyard. He thought that Tang Xiaobao had definitely cheated, but now that he had lost, he should get out of here quickly. The guy with glasses stopped abruptly and froze with a frightened expression on his face when someone shouted at him, asking where he was going. It turned out to be Tang Xiaobao. He crossed his arms and smirked and told Li Hao that he was slipping away quite quickly. The student council president looked at our hero with a hint of fear and asked what he was going to do to him now. Tang Xiaobao spread his arms out to the sides and asked Li Hao if he didn't know what he was about to do, and told the guy to put on his act. Li Hao got angry and shouted, asking if Tang Xiaobao wanted to get away with cheating on the test, and said that he would see how our hero did on the entrance exam. The protagonist agreed with him, but once again insisted that the head of the student council fulfill his promise first. The guy with glasses didn't want to keep his promise. He admitted that he lost, but told Tang Xiaobao to get out of his way, otherwise he would regret it. Tang Xiaobao looked down at his enemy and said that he was not afraid of him and would lose face if he let the guy go now. The student council president began to defend himself with his fists, asking if Xiaobao really wanted to fight and warning him that he had learned self-defense techniques. The protagonist was not afraid of Li Hao's pathetic attempts to show his strength, but only thanked the guy for the warning. The head of the student council tensed up. The guy had a bad feeling. He stood and held his fists weakly clenched in front of him. The bespectacled guy didn't even have time to notice how Tang Xiaobao, who had just been standing right in front of him, had disappeared in an instant. Li Hao only had time to be scared and think about how fast Tang Xiaobao was when our hero appeared right in front of his face. The protagonist declared that Li Hao had asked for a fight himself, and that he was ready to accept his challenge, and began to beat him with his hands. The crowd of students who were watching all this laughed out loud. They laughed at Li Hao, who was beaten unconscious, even though he called himself a taekwondo expert. The student council president gathered his strength and wanted to fight back against Tang Xiaobao. He swung his fist and shouted that our hero would die. Li Hao was at a loss as he attempted to strike his opponent, but Tang Xiaobao deftly dodged the blow and jumped to the side. The student council leader was so clumsy that after this attempt at attack, he tripped and fell to the ground. Tang Xiaobao smirked and said that he heard that Li Hao was a taekwondo master and assumed that the guy was just messing with him. The student council president, clenching his teeth in anger, found the strength to get up again after falling. He frowned with anger. The protagonist's classmate, who was also standing in the middle of the crowd of onlookers, shouted, warning Xiaobao that Liu Qiang was running away. The alarmed protagonist looked at his classmate and shouted back, asking where Liu Qiang had run off to. A boy from Tang Xiaobao's class pointed to the right and shouted that Liu Qiang should be at the school gate now. The boy turned out to be right. Our hero's main enemy was already standing near the school exit at this time, avoiding a meeting with Tang Xiaobao. The ash-haired boy was furious. He never thought before that Li Hao was no match for Tang Xiaobao. Liu Qiang froze and looked ahead in fear when someone caught up with him, came up from behind and clapped him on the shoulder. It turned out that it was our young hero, the young miracle doctor, who asked Liu Qiang where he was going. A frightened Liu Qiang turned to face the main character, began to back away and shout, asking the guy what he wanted from him. The protagonist laughed loudly and asked Liu Qiang why he and Li Hao had such a bad memory, and reminded him that they were not finished arguing yet. Liu Qiang shouted, asking if Tang Xiaobao really wanted to rob him. Even if he were sold as a whole, he was not worth $50,000. The young doctor grinned and calmly replied that he simply wanted to clarify when Liu Qiang would be able to pay him. The guy with ash-blonde hair replied that in any case he didn't have that much money, admitted his defeat, and suggested that they simply go their separate ways. At this time, Huoya stood in the crowd and also watched the guy's conversation. The girl hoped that Tang Xiaobao would not go too far. The protagonist, surprisingly, simply let go of Liu Qiang's shoulder and turned him around, smiled, and allowed the guy to simply leave. The ash-haired boy walked hesitantly towards the gate. Glancing at our hero, he knew that such behavior was not like Tang Xiaobao. Huoya and their classmate approached Tang Xiaobao and asked if the boy was really going to let Liu Qiang go and just let him go. Tang Xiaobao asked the boys not to worry about it and said that his enemy would pay double, and then someone called him. The main character took his phone out of his pocket and saw that his little sister was calling him, so he answered the call. He asked her what happened. His sister replied that today was her classmate's birthday, and they were going to a karaoke bar with Shu Lai. When Tang Xiaobao hung up the phone, he concluded that his sister had said good things about him in front of her classmates. After school, the main character went to the designated place. He was bored for a long time, leaning against the wall and waiting for the others. Finally, the rest of the party attendees for his sister's classmate's birthday arrived. and it was a whole crowd of girls. Tang Xiaobao's expression immediately changed. He smiled and warmly greeted his little sister's friends. One of the girl's classmates, dressed in dark clothes, said that she had reserved a room, so Tang Xiaobao should go with them. The guys all went together to a karaoke bar, where a separate room was already prepared for them. Tang Xiaobao sat down on the sofa surrounded by 4 girls. The main character whispered to his little sister that her classmates seemed to be children from rich families, because the rented hall was simply magnificent. The sister replied that the place belonged to her friend Susie's family, and asked her brother not to embarrass her, since she had invited him so that the guy could relax. The young miracle doctor remembered his friend, business magnate Ma Ming, who also deals in real estate, such as nightclubs. His sister's friend Susie told Tang Xiaobao that she always heard about him from Xiao Kao, and that he was really cute, and thanked him for coming. Tang Xiaobao replied that it was a joy for him to spend his time with such lovely girls, and wished her a happy birthday. The protagonist bumped glasses with the other girls to share a glass of red wine in honor of his birthday. Tang Xiaobao couldn't relax all evening. The girls wouldn't leave him alone, demanding that he drink with them again, or sing another song with them. The young man felt uncomfortable surrounded by persistent girls. He stood up, scratched the back of his head, and said that he needed to go to the restroom. Luckily, the crowd of girls didn't stop him, and the guy went to the door that led to the restroom to have some time alone. When the main character entered the restroom and disappeared from the eyes of his little sister's friends, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. When Tang Xiaobao returned to the hall, he noticed the crowd of thugs and wondered who they were. One of these strangers in a white shirt had already approached his little sister and asked if the girl would like to play with him. A second later, all 3 thugs who had been harassing the group of girls gasped as they were simultaneously hit in the head with bottles. Using an emergency teleportation, our hero appeared right in front of the guy in the white shirt and unexpectedly punched him in the face. Afterwards, the main character used the system to teleport again and started kicking the second guy from that group. Gritting his teeth in anger, Tang Xiaobao aimed at the third thug and punched the guy in the black suit hard in the face. The enraged young miracle doctor shouted at the hooligans, asking them how they dared to harass Master Tang's younger sister, and ordered them to get out of his sight. Tang Xiaokao immediately ran to her elder brother and threw herself into his arms. She was very scared after the skirmish. The 3 thugs didn't resist any longer and headed for the exit of the hall, believing that they were no match for our hero. The main character turned around and asked the other girls if he had scared them, and they replied that everything was fine. Tang Xiaobao sat down on the sofa next to the birthday girl again. She smiled and told our hero that little brother Bao was great. The other girls also thanked Tang Xiaobao for helping them out today, and said that he was a hero who saved a girl in trouble. Our young hero was flattered by such comments from the ladies. He sat leisurely on the sofa and smiled, listening to the compliments. But after some time, a crowd of thugs appeared again in the karaoke bar, led by Kao, who was pointed out the one who offended his guys. The protagonist stared at these hooligans and wondered if today he really wouldn't have the opportunity to just relax. Kuo and the other bully were scared when someone shouted, asking who was so brave and who dared to enter her territory. It turned out that Ma Ming's daughter, Ma Xiaofeng, had come into the hall, and the girl shouted that only those hooligans should blame themselves for their uselessness. The girl approached our hero and told him to let her know when he was going home so that those nasty little rascals wouldn't spoil their fun. Smiling, the business magnate's daughter turned around one last time, waved at the guy, and told him it was time for her to go and let them have their fun. The protagonist felt awkward about meeting Ma Xiaofeng. He scratched his face with his finger and simply agreed with her. Tang Xiaokao's little sister was angry with her brother and asked if he would really just let his half-sister, who had just arrived, leave. The surprised birthday girl asked if Tang Xiaobao really knew her, since this was Ma, whom all the thugs in the area feared and called her sister. Our young hero asked the girl why his friend had such authority among the local villains. The girl explained that this was because she was the only daughter of Ma Ming, the emperor who rules the underworld, and her daughter was his princess. The protagonist asked if Ma Ming was in the real estate business and couldn't understand how it was possible that the man was involved in the mafia. The birthday girl threw up her hands and explained that this was in the past. Now he is not part of the criminal world, but everyone should respect him. Tang Xiaobao's little sister's blonde friend told our hero that she didn't know Ma Xiaofeng was his girlfriend. Tang Xiaobao sighed heavily and replied that he thought they wouldn't believe him if the guy said that Ma Xiaofeng wasn't his girlfriend. After the karaoke bar, our hero went home, where the next events took place. It was already night outside. The guy was already sleeping peacefully in bed when he was awakened by an unexpected phone call in the middle of the night. Professor Zhang shouted into the phone, telling the guy to come to the hospital quickly because they needed his help, and Tang Xiaobao asked who the patient was and what his symptoms were. Tang Xiaobao yawned loudly when Zhang revealed that it was Liu Minghao from the Health Bureau, or rather his son, who had fallen into a coma in the middle of the night. Grinning, the protagonist asked why Professor Zhang should ask Liu Minghao to pick up the boy from home. Approaching the wardrobe to get ready, the protagonist told himself that the blow to the shoulder had done its job. As Tang Xiaobao was dressing in his usual school uniform, he received another phone call asking if he was Tang Xiaobao. The man introduced himself as Liu Minghao and said that Professor Zhang asked him to pick up the guy and he was already near his dormitory. And Tang Xiaobao asked him to wait. When our hero had washed up and slowly gotten ready, deciding not to rush, the guy left his apartment and began to walk down the stairs. On the street, he asked a man if he had been sent to take the boy to the hospital, and he respectfully invited Tang Xiaobao to get into the car. When our hero and Li Minghao arrived at the hospital in his expensive car, Professor Zhang met them and told the guy to hurry up. The patient was already in the ward. The protagonist entered the room where the patient was lying. It was the son of an official from the Health Bureau, who suddenly fell into a coma. Looking at the guy's condition, Tang Xiaobao concluded that the situation was not very good. He thought that this young man was already dead. Concerned, Liu Minghao asked the young miracle doctor what was wrong with his son and whether there was any way to help him. The protagonist closed his eyes, crossed his arms over his chest, and told the man that there was a way to help his son. The guy explained that he didn't have a license to practice medicine, so it wouldn't be worth it if he gave him a pair of shoes to wear after he treated the patient. Liu Minghao replied that Tang Xiaobao was saving his son's life, and he promised to provide full support to the boy if he continued his treatment. Frowning, the young protagonist looked at the man's face and replied that he doubted he would receive support. The patient's disgruntled mother asked Tang Xiaobao how he could say such a thing, when their family had nothing against the guy and he came here to save their son. The young miracle doctor explained to the patient's parents that they had no grudges against the boy, but their son did. Professor Zhang told Tang Xiaobao that they had to save the patient because he might die if they continued to stall. The protagonist admitted that if he had known that the patient would be his enemy Liu Qiang, he would not have come, because this guy still owes him money. Liu Minghao frowned and declared that he would cover all of his sick son's debts since he owed Tang Xiaobao money. Tang Xiaobao replied that he didn't want that, because the money Liu Qiang owed him was earned honestly as he had won the bet. An official from the Health Bureau asked our hero what he needed in order to save their son, Liu Qiang. The main character raised his index finger, grinned, and declared that he would save the boy when $100,000 were transferred to his account. Liu Minghao gritted his teeth and blushed with anger, but there was no other way out. He agreed to get the necessary amount. But first, Tang Xiaobao needed to save the guy. Tang Xiaobao agreed and asked everyone to leave the room, as he felt uncomfortable being watched while treating a patient. Professor Zhang headed towards the exit of the ward. Liu Minghao also agreed to leave so as not to interfere with the miracle doctor doing his work. When Liu Qiang and our hero were alone, Tang Xiaobao's eyes lit up red. He was about to teach his enemy a good lesson. The protagonist inserted several silver needles into acupuncture points on Liu Qiang's body to bring the boy out of his coma. Liu Qiang soon woke up, crying in pain, but allowing Tang Xiaobao to heal him so that once he recovered, the guy could deal with our hero. Tang Xiaobao noticed that his patient had woken up, and the first thing he did was ask the enemy how he was feeling. The protagonist was frightened when a loud scream was heard. Someone shouted from the corridor, asking if everything was okay with Liu Qiang. The guy looked out of the room and assured Liu Minghao that his son was fine, since he had come to his senses, and asked where the money was. An official from the Health Bureau handed our hero a large suitcase and announced that it contained exactly $100,000 in cash. When Tang Xiaobao took the suitcase and was about to leave, Liu Qiang shouted from the ward that our hero was a damn bastard whom he would kill. Liu Minghao scolded his son for his behavior. He slapped him in the face and shouted that he was just a loser, and the boy apologized to him. Angry at his son, the man demanded that Liu Qiang tell him how the feud between him and Tang Xiaobao began, and demanded all the details. Almost crying, the guy admitted that it all started with Wang Jing, Tang Xiaobao's ex-girlfriend, who was already in the hospital with a bouquet of flowers at the time. The girl entered the room and asked if Tang Xiaobao was to blame for the guy falling into a coma, and Liu Qiang shouted that this time the guy had seriously angered him, and he would finish him off. A worried Wang Jing asked her new boyfriend what he was going to do with her ex-boyfriend. An angry Liu Qiang said that his cousin would soon return, and if he found out that he had been bullied, he would kill Tang Xiaobao. When Wang Jing heard this story, she assumed that her new boyfriend's cousin was involved in killing people. Liu Qiang shouted that the girl's guess was correct. His cousin was a professional killer, and Wang Jing would die too if he let it slip. The girl was scared, and in a trembling voice she promised the ash-haired boy that she would not tell anyone about it. When the main character returned home, his father met him and asked him to come over because they needed to talk about something. Tang Xiaobao's father said their house was already in a dilapidated state and asked his son why he didn't find a home repairman. The young man suggested to his father that he do a major renovation and renovate the house, turning it into a large 3-story building. The boy's father didn't mind. He said that he would find someone who could build their house. When Tang Xiaobao was spending time at home, someone started knocking persistently on the front door. The guy asked them not to knock and went to the door. Opening the door, the protagonist saw several guys in black business suits on the threshold. One of them asked if he was Tang Xiaobao. The father came up and asked his son what was going on. Tang Xiaobao assured his father that everything was fine and he would be back soon. The young miracle doctor confirmed that his name was Tang Xiaobao and asked the stranger what they wanted from him. It turned out that a law enforcement officer was standing in front of him. He told the guy that he was accused of an intentional act of assault, and the officer came to ask him a couple of questions. The protagonist was forced to go to the police station, where he would be interrogated by officers as an accused. The guy was visibly upset. He thought that Li Hao had snitched on him, because only he could stoop to such a level. Sitting on a chair in front of the officers, Tang Xiaobao honestly told the police how everything happened on the day of the confrontation with Li Hao. The police officer was disappointed to learn that it was a simple fight between classmates, asked about the deal, and said that it was wrong to just get into a fight with someone. A subordinate approached the director and whispered in his ear that Mr. Ma Ming from Mingchen Company was here to see Tang Xiaobao. The police station boss became visibly wary when he heard Mr. Ma's name and ordered a subordinate to invite the man inside. Mr. Ma did not come alone, but with his daughter, Ma Xiaofeng asked Tang Xiaobao if he was okay and if he was injured. Without answering the girl, Tang Xiaobao first thanked her father, who replied that there was no need for thanks since they were now one family. Ma Ming asked his old friend Director Wen how to get Tang Xiaobao out of here. He replied that the situation was not serious, but his classmate's family was not going to withdraw the application. The man said that in that case he would find Li Mingjiang, Li Hao's father himself, and teach him a lesson for his ingratitude. Ma Xiaofeng waved her hand at our hero and told Brother Bao to rest assured that Li Mingjiang would withdraw his statement after meeting with her father. The phone rang. Director Wen handed the young man his phone, and Tang Xiaobao asked if it would be a violation if he answered it. The policeman laughed and told the young man that it was just a phone call, so everything was fine. It turned out that Huoya had called him. Tang Xiaobo assured the girl that everything was fine, and that he would only be at the station for a short time. But the girl still wanted to come. The main character tried to convince the girl not to come here, but she didn't listen and hung up. Director Wen asked the guy if his girlfriend had called him, and he admitted that he liked Huoya, but she was not his girlfriend yet. Soon Huoya walked into the police station scratching her head, her face showing that she was in an angry mood. Huoya crossed her arms and asked Tang Xiaobao what was wrong, and he repeated his words again that he was fine. Director Wen was shocked that Tang Xiaobao was even friends with the mayor's daughter. He told her that after Ma Ming met with Li Hao's family, they would let the guy go. The pink-haired girl, hearing a familiar name, assumed that Ma Ming was the father of the main character's girlfriend. Tang Xiaobao smiled and told his lover that he liked Huoya much more than Ma Xiaofeng. The girl snorted and left. Offended by the guy, Tang Xiaobao tried to stop her. And Director Wen thought that the guy was standing with his feet in two boats, that is, he had two mistresses. Ma Ming met with Mr. Li and warned him that if he did not take care of his poor son, there would be no more cooperation between them. Meanwhile, at the police station, Ma Xiaofeng grabbed our hero by the hand and offered to take him home and see his aunt and uncle at the same time. The protagonist politely declined the offer and then thanked his younger sister for appearing at the right time. Tang Xiaobao felt awkward, surrounded by several ladies. He turned around and noticed that Huoya was offended and did not look at him. The boy thanked Huoya for stopping by, while Director Wen stood nearby giving him a thumbs up. The pink-haired girl turned her back to the young man and asked him not to thank her because she had not helped him in any way. Soon Ma Xiaofeng found herself near our hero's house. People crowded around the girl. They were delighted that their Tang Xiaobao had found such a nice girl for himself. Our hero was not thrilled to hear his neighbors shouting about how Xiaobao and Xiaofeng were perfect for each other. He perked up and looked at the girl when Ma Xiaofeng approached him and addressed the guy, adding a respectful address. Angered, he crossed his arms over his chest and asked the girl what was wrong with her, and whether she had nothing better to do that she was going to torment him again. Ma Xiaofeng smirked, looked at the guy from under her brows, and declared that nothing could make her give in and let the storm rage on even stronger. The main character cried in his heart. He did not understand what Xiaofeng was so attracted to him. He suffered because he could not do anything in this situation. The following events took place in Tongjiang County, specifically at the traditional Chinese medicine hospital. Student Council President Li Hao lay there after being beaten by our hero, the boy screaming, asking his father if he really wanted to let Tang Xiaobao go. Mr. Li yelled back at his son, asking if he knew who he was dealing with, since it was Ma Ming himself from the Ming Chen Company, and their family's entire income came from working with that firm. Li Hao's mother asked everyone to calm down and forget about it, telling her son to let the issue resolve itself. A saddened Li Hao tried to explain to his mother that he was simply trying to improve his relationship with Zheng Dong, otherwise he wouldn't have been beaten. Mr. Li was visibly surprised when he heard that the fight broke out because his son stood up for Zheng Dong. The student council president confirmed once again that this was why he was beaten by our hero in the schoolyard. The fair-haired man wanted to know his wife's opinion. He turned around and asked Li Hao's mother what she thought about it. The woman suggested that her husband not get involved in this matter. She thought that the Zheng family would make their move sooner or later because Mr. Zheng would not tolerate suffering as a king. The following events took place at the protagonist educational institution, where Tang Xiaobao went the next day. Sitting alone at his desk, Tang Xiaobao was worried that after so much time, he was still at the 4th level of reputation. Huoya approached her classmate and asked what he was doing there, since it was break time and everyone had gone out for a walk. But the guy stayed behind. The protagonist did not answer the girl's question. He looked at her with a smirk and asked what Huoya wanted from him. The pink-haired girl lowered her head, blushed with embarrassment, and admitted that she wanted to discuss something with Tang Xiaobao. Tang Xiaobao smiled when the girl initiated a conversation with him, and he asked what she wanted to talk to him about. Huoya said that she would soon be turning 18 and would like to invite Tang Xiaobao to her birthday celebration. The protagonist was overjoyed and immediately agreed to accept the invitation, saying that he would definitely be at the goddess's celebration. The girl warned the guy that there might be other guests at the party whom Tang Xiaobao did not want to meet, and they could cause him problems. Tang Xiaobao assumed that she was referring to Chen Xiao, who disliked her, and he flexed his fists and decided that he needed to prepare a special gift. A saddened Huoya told our hero that the gift should not be too expensive. Tang Xiaobao grinned and told the girl not to worry and promised to prepare a special gift for her 18th birthday. The schoolflower didn't mind. She told her classmate that she would later tell him where they would celebrate the holiday. When Huoya and Tang Xiaobao went down to the schoolyard, our hero was met by a pretty stranger who asked if he was the same Xiaobao. When the main character saw her, he was delighted by the beauty of the stranger. He asked if he could find out who she was. The girl introduced herself as Deng Ya and said that her grandfather's name was Deng Jianzhong, and she came here to invite the young man to dinner. The guy was delighted when he realized that the girl in front of him was the former school beauty. He said that he was very glad to meet his older sister. While Tang Xiaobao and his new acquaintance were chatting pleasantly, Huoya stood nearby and flashed a cold gaze, feeling jealous of the guy. When Deng Ya looked at the pink-haired girl, she realized that Huoya, like a modern, sensitive high school student, was jealous of Tang Xiaobao. The girl turned away resentfully. She thought that big sister Deng Ya was a very sweet girl and would definitely please Tang Xiaobao. Huoya was right. Tang Xiaobao looked at his new acquaintance with loving eyes, thinking about her thin waist and beautiful figure. Deng Ya smiled and asked if Tang Xiaobao had seen enough, and told him to hurry up, as her grandfather was already waiting for them. The protagonist immediately went to the luxurious modern mansion of Director Dan, who met him at the door and invited little Tan inside. Tang Xiaobao walked into the living room and sat on the sofa opposite the principal of his school, asking if the man wanted to see him. Director Dan looked at his granddaughter and asked Cheeky why she didn't explain everything to the guy. She only replied that she would make more soup and they could start eating. The bespectacled man asked the boy what he thought of his granddaughter. Tang Xiaobao replied that she was a sweet and good-natured girl, and suspected that the old man wanted them to marry. The school's principal said that Tang Xiaobao and his granddaughter get along well. And Hiki is a renowned designer whose designs have won awards around the world. After massaging his shoulder, the man said he had heard from a friend that Tang Xiaobao was an acupuncture master, and asked him to look into his rapidly developing rheumatism. The protagonist nodded his head and agreed to watch without any problems. He concluded that this was precisely why he was invited to dinner today. Tang Xiaobao began the acupuncture procedure, inserting a silver needle into several acupuncture points on Director Deng's neck and shoulders. The man's granddaughter entered the living room and, seeing this, smiled and asked our hero if he was a doctor. The guy modestly replied that he just knew a little about the matter, while he was thinking about what an amazing body his school principal's granddaughter had. Pointing to her shoulders and neck, the girl asked if Tang Xiaobao could check her health as well. The protagonist assumed that Sitsi was just joking, because he had already seen that the girl was absolutely healthy, and there was nothing to check there. Tang Xiaobao's mouth opened wide, and he was stunned when he realized that she had the same problem as the Heavenly Marshal, and that she was also an immortal. Cheeky became wary when she noticed his reaction, and in a low voice, she asked Tang Xiaobao if he noticed something wrong with her. Director Deng became worried and asked what his granddaughter's illness was. Tang Xiaobao reassured him, saying that she was generally healthy, but it was possible that she had cardiomyopathy. Soon Tang Xiaobao left the Deng family mansion, and the girl ran out after him and asked if he would leave without even telling Cheeky what illness she had. The protagonist turned around and assumed that in front of him was the Weaving Maiden, also known as Weaver Lu from Chinese legends, who had lost her divine qi. Titsy looked at the protagonist in shock and asked how he knew this. Not denying that she was immortal, the guy pointed at himself with his thumb, smiled, and declared that he was a miracle doctor, especially since he had recently met the Heavenly Marshal. Weaver Lu ran up to him, grabbed him by the shoulders, and asked where the Heavenly Marshal was. He replied that he was an immortal who leaves and returns without a trace, so such information was unknown to him. Seeing Tang Xiaobao as her only hope, the immortal Weaving Maiden asked the boy if there was any way for her to return back to heaven. The protagonist smiled and replied that perhaps later, since he couldn't return her now, but if Cheeky taught him the techniques, he could learn it. Cheeky got angry and replied that she was now an ordinary mortal and did not know any techniques. Tang Xiaobao could only turn to her if he needed to sew some clothes. The next action took place in a large, ancient building. It was the Tibetan treasure house where Tang Xiaobao went. The protagonist entered and began to stroll around the hall. He wanted to choose the perfect gift for Huoya since his competitors would be at her party. While looking at the shop windows, the guy was upset to see that the gifts here were very expensive. He was looking for something special but cheaper. The guy walked up to one of the glass display cases and looked at the ring that caught his attention. The protagonist bought a ring for Huoya and left the Tibetan gift house. Fortunately, it only cost 10,000. The boy was surprised when, holding the ring, it lit up blue, and the system congratulated him on finding the lost protective item. Tang Xiaobao's eyes lit up with delight, and he said that a protective item would be the perfect gift for the girl he liked. The celebration of Huoya's 18th birthday had already begun at the Desheng Mansion, a luxurious house in traditional Chinese style. At her own celebration, the girl was sad while her father sat nearby and offered a drink to Xinan, his wealthy nephew. The father asked his daughter what she was doing and suggested starting the party, but she grabbed the phone and asked him to let her call her friend first. The pink-haired girl put the phone to her ear and listened attentively to the beeps, waiting for someone to answer her call. The protagonist was frightened when he heard the ridiculous ringtone of his phone. At that time, he was already in the mansion of the city mayor's family. He felt awkward when the crowd of guests suddenly turned around and looked at him angrily, thinking how stupid his ringtone was. He scratched the back of his head and apologized to the birthday girl for being late, since he was helping Professor Zhang with the operation, but she asked him not to take it to heart. Tang Xiaobao walked up to the sofa where the head of the family and Xinan were sitting, and the boy greeted Uncle Mayor. The birthday girl approached him and introduced him to her cousin Tang Xiaobao, saying that he was just her classmate. Xinan got up from the sofa and walked up to our hero. He asked Mr. Tang to let him introduce himself, and said that he was Chen Xinan from Jiangnan City. The protagonist silently smiled insincerely back at the guy. He thought that Xinan looked like a hypocrite, an asshole, and a very sinister person. Two more guys approached Tang Xiaobao. The girl introduced herself as Luo Jia, the birthday girl's cousin, and the guy introduced himself as Luo Tong, Huoya's cousin. Jinan decided to present his gift to the birthday girl first. He opened the box and showed the girl the beautiful necklace he bought for her. Luo Jia was delighted and asked if this was not the blue ocean star that was auctioned in London last year and sold for $150 million. With a sly grin, Chen Xinan asked what gift Tang Xiaobao had decided to give to Huoya. Tang Xiaobao felt awkward, but he presented the girl with a ring and said that it was a jade pendant that would protect Huoya from misfortune. The whole family stared at our hero with disapproval. They thought he had read too many novels to give the girl a talisman against bad luck. However, Huoya liked the guy's gift. She immediately put the pendant on her neck and thanked Tang Xiaobu. Chen Xinan gritted his teeth in anger. The boy didn't understand how a gift bought on Xiaobao Street could be better than his expensive pendant. The birthday girl smiled sweetly and said that since everything was in order, she was ready to place an order to begin the festive dinner. As Huoya walked past several wooden cabinets and didn't look in that direction, she didn't even notice that something was flying at her head. The protagonist noticed that a heavy wooden object had fallen from the cabinet and was flying straight at the girl's head, so he shouted at her to take care of herself. The confused pink-haired girl only had time to turn around and look up, not realizing what was happening. The jade pendant she had put on after Huoya had given it to her by our hero activated and began to emit a bright golden light. The protective talisman fired a powerful golden beam and pushed back the wooden sculpture that was flying towards the girl's head. Huoya was frightened and stood rooted to the spot. Our hero approached the girl and asked if she was okay. She stuttered and replied that everything was fine. Her cousin admitted that this jade pendant was a real treasure, and if it weren't for it, Huoya would be in great danger. The girl thanked Tang Xiaobao, but asked him to take the pendant back because it was too expensive. He disagreed and asked her to keep the gift for herself, because when Huoya was safe, he felt better. The head of the family approached the children and also thanked our hero for saving his daughter from injury with his gift. Smiling hypocritically, Chen Zinan shook our hero's hand and also thanked him for saving his bride, because he didn't know how he would have lived on if something had happened to her. The pink-haired girl became angry when Shinan said that she was his fiancée, but she was interrupted by someone's loud, deliberate cough. She looked at her father and tried to ask him with her eyes why her father had dragged her into this. The mayor of the city also silently asked the girl to control herself and not to upset Shinan. Tang Xiaobao shook Shinan's hand angrily and replied that there was no need for thanks, as he would always protect Huoya and would not allow anyone to harm her. The protagonist understood that this was just a marriage of convenience, and he was angry because he would never force Huoya to marry him now. An awkward silence fell over the room as Tang Xiaobao's phone rang again, its silly ringtone echoing throughout the room. After answering a call from Wei, the guy heard that someone had a heart attack and said that he was on his way to help that person. Tang Xiaobao told the birthday girl that he was very sorry, but he couldn't stay with her on her birthday, and therefore he owed her. Dissatisfied, Huoya asked what was so urgent about Tang Xiaobao that he had to leave so quickly. Swiftly leaving the mansion, the protagonist briefly replied to his beloved girl that people's lives were at stake. A few seconds later, the young miracle doctor left the house to go help his brother Wei, who had something happen. Director Wen met him outside his home and said that it was no wonder Tang Xiaobao wasn't afraid that time at the police station, since he had the support of Officer Wei. The protagonist replied to Director Wen that he never intended to ask Wei for help. The man said that Wen Donglai, an old man from the Wei family, works in the Municipal Public Security Bureau and is the boss of his boss's boss. Tang Xiaobao walked up to the white car, smiled politely, and suggested that the officer hurry up because he still had patients waiting for him. The protagonist and the policeman got into Wen's car, and the man suggested going to the hospital. Soon the car parked near the hospital where the patient whose health officer Wei was so concerned about was being treated. Near the hospital, our hero was met by Officer Wei, who quickly asked the guy to allow him to introduce him to his father, who was standing behind him. The elderly man shook our hero's hand and said that he hoped Tang Xiaobao would save the patient's life, and asked him not to let them down. Confused, Tang Xiaobao asked Officer Wei who exactly was sick and what had happened, and the man suggested they go for a walk and talk in private. Officer Wei said that one of his father's old comrades, named Uncle Cao, had a heart attack. Meanwhile, the patient, Cao Jianjun, lay unconscious on the hospital bed, his entire face covered in sweat. The nurse told the doctor that the man's heart was about to stop and asked if they should administer electric shock now. The doctor agreed with her. An experienced doctor in a white coat gave the order to prepare everything for this procedure. But when Tang Xiaobao and Officer Wei entered the hospital, the doctor said they had done all they could and asked them to inform the patient's family so they could prepare for the funeral. The patient's friend, Officer Wei's father, asked our hero, with hope in his heart, if he could first see if there was a way to save the man. After looking at the guy, doubts crept into the old man's mind as to whether it was worth taking into account Tang Xiaobao, who was so young, but Tang Xiaobao was currently busy with something completely different. He stared at the corner of the room and couldn't believe that in front of him was a ghost again. It was a woman. Officer Wei began to turn around. He was tensely silent, not understanding what Tang Xiaobao was looking at, because he himself had not seen anything like that in the corner of the room. Worried about our hero, a man from the investigation bureau approached the stunned Tang Xiaobao and asked what was wrong. The protagonist, without admitting to seeing a ghost, stated that the patient had a tumor near the heart that needed immediate surgery. The old man was shocked, not understanding how Tang Xiaobao had identified the tumor without an analysis. He said that he knew about it, but it was impossible to operate on the patient now. The young miracle doctor asked permission if he could try performing heart surgery on his own. Officer Wei asked the boy if he was sure about this. Xiaobao replied that he was not, but he could try to cure the man. The policeman suggested that Dad bet on the young miracle doctor, and said that they should believe Tang Xiaobao. The old man agreed and advised Tang Xiaobao to discuss the details of the operation with Dr. Li, because the doctor could help him during the operation. At this time, the ghost of a woman stood next to a dying man. Sweating, she persistently massaged the patient's heart. The protagonist sternly demanded that everyone leave the room and declared that he would examine the patient alone. Officer Wei, his elderly father, and Dr. Li obediently left the room and stood in the corridor. Not understanding why Tang Xiaobao needed a private examination, our hero shouted at the evil spirit, asking how she dared to disturb the patient, and threatened to destroy the ghost's soul if she did not leave immediately. The ghost woman, emitting a bright blue light, was stunned when she realized that the protagonist had the ability to see her. Tang Xiaobao was also shocked when she spoke. He guessed that in front of him was a spirit ghost born with spiritual wisdom who had become an immortal ghost. The stunned guy shouted, warning that he still had the artifact and could destroy the ghost with one wave of his hand, so she should hurry up and leave. The woman calmly replied to the young doctor that she, Zhu Yulan's concubine, simply wanted to meet the young master and was not harming anyone. Tang Xiaobao asked why she was hanging around here then, and what relation this patient had to her. He no longer feared the naive, ancient female ghost. The ghost told a long story about how she was a practicing physician under the guidance of Lord Hua and Lord Sun. But afterwards she came to the mortal world as a punishment. When the woman said that she was here to heal people and atone for her guilt, the guy asked if she was talking about Sun Gong and Hua Gong. He asked if practicing doctors could become immortal by treating people. She replied that yes, but it was a long and bumpy road, and she did not strive to become immortal. Believing the ghost woman, the protagonist shouted for her to quickly save the man, because the patient was dying. The woman stated that the man could be saved as long as Tang Xiaobao kept him alive, but the man replied that it was no problem. The protagonist inserted several silver needles into the patient's acupuncture points and announced that he was finished and that it was now up to the ghost. Before she began, the woman stated that she wanted to ask our hero for a favor after she saved the man. Tang Xiaobao was perplexed as he watched the ghostly doctor. He didn't understand anything at all. The image before his eyes frightened him. When it was all over, the guy gave her a thumbs up and said that the woman was worthy of being Hua's disciple, and he was speechless. The woman replied that everything was fine, and then the immortal doctor knelt down and asked Tang Xiaobao to take her in. A perplexed Xiaobao assumed that this was some kind of joke, since spirits and people go along different paths, and he couldn't take her with him because she would scare people. Zhu Yulan stated that she had been cultivating for 1,000 years and could sense the artifacts on Tang's body, one of which was a storage ring in which she could hide. The guy assumed that the woman wanted to acknowledge him as her master, and asked what the ghost's purpose was. Yulan replied that she could hide from enemies inside the ring, and could also help the doctor cure diseases, improve the speed of cultivation, and much more. The protagonist said that he did not see any ill will in the girl towards him, so he agreed to help her in his own way when trouble came. The ghost concubine Zhu Yulan was very happy when she heard this. She asked if he was telling the truth. The guy replied that he never lies. Tang Xiaobao activated his storage ring and placed the ghostly concubine into it. The artifact lit up with a bright light. The young miracle doctor looked at his ring and asked how to address her. The girl replied that she could simply be called Lan Lan. When the protagonist left the ward, Officer Wei's father met him in the corridor and asked him about the patient's condition. Tang Xiaobao pleased the man and, without further ado, briefly replied that his friend was already completely fine. Dr. Li couldn't believe his ears. He shouted that this operation could not have been so successful, and insisted on another complete examination of the patient. Meanwhile, the old man's friend woke up. He was completely confused seeing his comrade. He asked why he was in the hospital. The old man, sitting by his friend's bed, said that if he had not invited the brilliant Dr. Xiaobao, he would have already entered the palace of the kingdom of Hades. The patient thanked our hero very much and complained that he could not get up, and Tang Xiaobao advised him to check again to see if the cancer cells had spread. Officer Wei approached the young miracle doctor and asked if he knew what kind of man he had just saved. Our hero had no idea. The police officer said that the patient was a member of the Cao family and the second commander of the Jiangnan military region, and there was nothing he could not do in Jiangnan. The protagonist stared at the officer with shocked eyes and asked if it was really such a big shot. Wei assured him that he was not lying to the guy. The old man told Tang Xiaobao that he had another small problem and hoped that the boy could help him solve it. The elderly man handed him an x-ray and told him that he had a piece of shrapnel in his right leg and that he was also suffering from gout and nightmares. Tang Xiaobao, looking at the photo, asked Tang's opinion. The woman said that the nightmares were the consequences of the battle and that severe rheumatism developed due to the shrapnel. The protagonist confessed to his grandfather that he could not yet cure his illness, but he could teach him massage techniques to ease the pain. The puzzled old man asked if the young miracle doctor could really perform heart surgery but was unable to remove shrapnel. Tang Xiaobao shrugged and said that he couldn't do it now, and promised him that as soon as the opportunity arose, he would cure him. The man asked if Tang Xiaobao could examine him tomorrow, and the man replied that his son had already told him about his father's problem, and that he would help him. The elderly man did not bother the miracle doctor any further, and agreed to accept help from Tang Xiaobao. Officer Wei put his arm around the guy's neck and invited the protagonist to go to his house for a good drink after a hard day. At the Wei family's home, our hero met the woman he had saved during childbirth. The officer's wife thanked him for saving her and her child. The protagonist replied to the woman that there was no need for thanks, and invited her to go have a drink with them. Night fell after the party at Officer Wei's house. Our hero went home. He slept peacefully under the blanket in his bed. The guy suddenly opened his eyes when he felt very cold. He screamed, asking what Tauntaun was doing in his bed, and did ghosts need to sleep. The girl jumped out of bed and explained to Master Xiaobao that she had been in the mortal world for a long time, and was used to sleeping at night. The guy felt awkward and tried to explain to the woman that it wasn't very good for them to sleep in the same room and on the same bed. Lan Lan approached him and stated that she, Lan Yu, belonged to her master, and it was logical that she would want to always be by his side. Realizing that he couldn't control the ghost while he was sleeping, the guy got angry, got up and shouted that sleeping together was not good, and then he would make a bed for her. The worried ghost woman asked her master where she could sleep that night since she didn't have a separate bed. The protagonist plopped back down on his bed and lay on his side to go back to sleep, and replied that they would sleep together tonight. The girl lay down next to her master with a smile and thanked him, and Tang Xiaobao asked the ghost why she was so cold. Tang explained that all ghosts were cold, but when she reached the realm of the Spirit King, she would be no different from an ordinary person. The protagonist blushed with embarrassment at the thought that when she became human, he might be able to date a ghost. Soon the young miracle doctor was introduced to Uncle Cao's daughter, Chao Ying, who was here to meet Tang Xiaobao. The girl thanked our hero for curing her father's illness, handed him her business card and asked him to call if he needed help. The guy happily accepted the business card. He was very happy that he had found connections with such an elite family who would now help him if necessary. The protagonist suggested that old Wei find a place where he could help the old man, and he suggested that they go to the guest room together. Uncle Cao's pretty young daughter approached the guy and asked if she could go with them. Tang Xiaobao replied that it was not a good idea. The girl puffed out her cheeks in resentment, crossed her arms over her chest and asked if this was a secret meeting. And our hero noticed her figure. Tang Xiaobao's cheeks flushed because of Miss Cao's beauty. He explained that it was not a secret, but it was a private matter. Miss Cao, offended by our hero, turned away and did not insist that Tang Xiaobao take her with him. The protagonist and Old Man Wei went to the guest room to have Tang Xiaobao relieve his rheumatic pain. 5 minutes later, the old man, flushed and out of breath from the massage, left the room and said that he had to go and that Tang Xiaobao and Chao could talk for now. Tang Xiaobao said that now that Uncle Wei had recovered, he had to return home. Mr. Cao's daughter asked where the guy was going and offered to give him a ride, but he replied that he needed to go home. The guy did not refuse the offer, and soon the girl's expensive white car was racing down the city street. All this time, Tang Xiaobao was looking at the girl's figure while she was driving the car. He liked not only the body, but also Miss Cao's beautiful face. The girl's car was not alone on the road. A yellow SUV was racing behind the car. A man wearing a brown hat and a beard was driving the car, holding a cigarette in his teeth and chasing the girl's car. The girl grabbed the steering wheel and told Tang Xiaobao that an SUV was following them, and asked him to hold on because she would speed up. The main character was perplexed. He sincerely did not understand why anyone needed to pursue them. Miss Cao began to panic, screaming that the SUV was catching up with them, and she couldn't get rid of it. Tang Xiaobao sat rooted to the spot in the passenger seat, frightened and trying to mentally reach out to Lan Yu to help him. At this time, the green SUV had already caught up with the white car and tried to stop it, ramming the side of Miss Cao's car. Noticing this, the protagonist shouted at the girl to be careful and hugged her, protecting Cao with his body. The girl felt awkward being touched by a guy she barely knew, but she decided that she would endure it to save her life. After the SUV rammed the girl's car, 2 more gray cars drove up to the car and surrounded it. The driver got out of the SUV holding a knife in his hand and decided to check the car to make sure that Tang Xiaobao and his girlfriend were dead. The attacker's eyes widened when he saw that Tang Xiaobao and Miss Cao were completely fine after the accident. Sitting on the asphalt, the frightened girl asked the man who sent him and promised to pay him 3 times as much. The villain in the hat shouted an apology and declared that he would not answer her questions, then swung his knife. Luckily, our hero came to the rescue. The guy teleported and picked up the girl in his arms to protect her from the killer. The man in the hat was confused. He didn't understand where the boys had gone when he, trying to deal with them with a knife, discovered that they had disappeared in an instant. The protagonist patted the frightened Miss Cao on the head and asked her to stay here and watch while he took care of the criminal. The girl beamed with delight. She thought that the handsome Tang Xiaobao was the handsome prince she had dreamed of all her life. Tang Xiaobao stood behind the bandit and said that he was here, asking where the man who had his back to him was looking. The man with the hat turned around, readied his knife to attack, and shouted at the bastard that he looked like he wanted to die. The criminal screamed in unexpected pain when Tang Xiaobao approached him and hit him on the shin, causing him to drop the knife and lose his balance. The bearded bandit fell to the ground so hard that his hat flew off his head, and he froze in surprise and fear. The protagonist sat on the bandit and shouted that he would take his life for acting like an idiot in his presence. The man who was hiding his bald head under his hat looked at Tang Xiaobao and shouted at him not to comment on his hairstyle. Tang Xiaobao was visibly startled when the criminal managed to rise to his feet and attack the hero, punching him in the chest. The bald-headed bandit fled, realizing that the police would soon be there, that there was no time to waste, and that he had to retreat. However, the young miracle doctor did not want to let the criminal escape, and the guy used teleportation again to catch up with him. The protagonist landed right in front of the fleeing man and asked where he was running, as it was too late to hide. The confused bald man didn't even have time to ask the guy how he caught up with him so quickly when a police car started honking. Tang Xiaobao again made the bandit fall to the ground, pinned him to the floor with his foot, and asked the bald man if he wanted to run away. Officer Wei arrived at the crime scene and asked our hero if he was okay. The police had already arrested the criminal. The guy replied that he was fine, but he didn't think he would run into a professional killer, and the officer asked him not to worry anymore. Miss Cao sternly ordered the officer to find out who the killer's boss was as soon as possible. Otherwise, her family would take control of the case themselves. Officer Wei asked the girl to be sure that they would find everyone involved and felt humiliated by her words. Remaining collected and cool, the girl turned around and told our hero to get in the car, and she would take him home. But at this moment, Tang Xiaobao was disturbed by a phone ringing. He took the phone out of his pocket and wondered who was calling him. It turned out that Huoya had called him. They agreed to meet, and the guy promised that he would soon come to Nanshan Park. While driving, Miss Cao asked him if his girlfriend had just called him, and she was upset to hear that he had a boyfriend. The protagonist smiled and reassured the girl, saying that it was only his classmate who had called him. Soon, Tang Xiaobao arrived at Nanshan Scenic Park. When he saw Huoya, he waved to her and asked if she was looking for him. Miss Cao was sitting in her car at this time and watching the boys. Seeing the girl, she realized that she was the daughter of the Luo family. The pink-haired girl invited the guy to sit down somewhere and talk. Xiaobao asked her to tell him what happened. Huoya confessed that now that she was 18 years old, she was being forced to marry, and the protagonist realized that the hypocrite Chen Xinan was behind it. The girl perked up, and our hero tensed up when the voice of the man who had been looking for Huoya and had finally found him sounded in the park. It turned out that it was Xinan. The girl asked what he was doing there, and he smiled and explained that they were simply spiritually connected. An angry Tang Xiaobao decided to stand up for his classmate, shielded her with his back, and suggested that the bastard leave the girl alone. Chen Xinan grinned and asked the boy if he knew who he was, and if our hero had heard of the Chen family from Zhanghan City. A puzzled Tang Xiaobao asked who this family was and what they were famous for, and Huoya explained that they were one of the 4 noble families in the city. The protagonist looked at the guy with disdain again and said that this means there are 3 more influential families in the city besides the Chen. Chen Xinan decided to retreat and turned around, saying that he saw that Tang Xiaobao was no slouch and hoped that the guy would not regret it in the future. The young miracle doctor showed the guy 2 middle fingers and cheekily asked, clicking his tongue, if Xinan thought he could scare him with this. The pink-haired girl thanked our hero for helping her get rid of Chen Xinan and said that it was time for her to go. The main character was outraged that the girl was just leaving now, which meant she had used him, and that was it. And he demanded that she come back and they talk. Huoya didn't turn around. She smiled and thought that our hero was a fool when he asked to give her acupuncture today. Soon the guy received a message from her. Huoya asked him to come to the Hanshin Hotel in room 318 at 7 o'clock in the evening so that she could tell him something important. Tang Xiaobao cried with happiness because the cutest girl in school made an appointment with him and declared that she was his goddess. Thinking that the girl had invited him for an acupuncture treatment, the young man arrived at the Hanshin Hotel at the appointed time. The protagonist approached the door that led to room number 18. He was in a hurry to meet Huoya as soon as possible. But when the guy cautiously looked inside, he was noticeably surprised because it was not Huoya who greeted him in the room, but an unfamiliar blonde. A girl in a white dress with blonde hair immediately threw herself into our hero's arms. He was stunned, not understanding who it was. With a sly grin, the stranger screamed, begging for help from those in the inn, and began to claim that Tang Xiaobao wanted to harm her. The next second, two men in police uniforms ran into the hotel room and shouted, ordering Tang Xiaobao to raise his hands up. The protagonist urgently used teleportation to another location in order to avoid arrest, and found himself on the street with a frightened face. Now Tang Xiaobao was safe. The boy had no idea who was trying to set him up. Having escaped from the clutches of the police, the young man soon went to his school where he met his friend. Tang Xiaobao's classmate asked if he had already told Huoya about what happened yesterday, and he replied that nothing would happen if the girl didn't find out. The guy became wary when he turned around and noticed that a whole crowd of strangers was now rapidly approaching him. Among this crowd, the protagonist saw a stranger, a girl with blonde hair who had been at the hotel the previous night. The blonde with green eyes pointed her finger at our hero and screamed that this was the villain who tried to harm her last night. Tang Xiaobao was approached by police officers and asked if he had been in room 318 at the Hancheng Hotel yesterday. He replied that he had, but that he had returned to school shortly after. The officer told the guy to go with them to the police station to investigate. He didn't understand why such a handsome guy couldn't just find a girlfriend. A classmate stood up for Tang Xiaobao and said that the guy would not harm a girl. The others shouted that she was not beautiful enough for him. The blonde tensed up and blushed with embarrassment when all the students stood up for Xiaobao and started shouting that she wasn't as beautiful as the Xiao girls. Tang Xiaobao wanted to find out who framed him, so he told the policeman that everything was fine, and if he had done nothing wrong, he didn't need to be afraid of ghosts knocking on his door. So the protagonist agreed to follow the officers to the police station, and soon he was there. Officer Wen jumped up from his seat and screamed when he heard that his junior, Tang Xiaobao, had been arrested for attempting to rape a girl. The officer's colleague said that the girl he saw was not as beautiful as Ma Ming's daughter or the city mayor's daughter. The director immediately called his friend and colleague Wei and reported that something had happened, and Tang Xiaobao had been arrested. During interrogation, the police officer asked the guy if he had any evidence of his innocence. Xiaobao stated that this was a blatant setup, and he had messages from Huoya that proved it. The police officer admitted that Huoya's phone had been lost the day before. They found it in the trash during the investigation, and someone had used the phone to text the boy. One of the officers came into the office and stated that the case was being investigated slowly, so they should pay attention to the evidence. The policeman perked up and asked his boss what brought him here. The man replied that they had made such a fuss that Chief Wei had called him here. The officer who interrogated our hero was stunned to hear that a higher-ranking police officer had found out about everything. The boss relayed to his subordinate Officer Wei's words that Tang Xiaobao could not have committed such a crime and that he had saved his life. The police officer responded that the victim still claims that Tang Xiaobao did it and has not yet refused to withdraw his statement. Meanwhile, the protagonist mentally turned to Lan Lan and asked for help. She replied that she would scare the girl to death so that she would tell the truth. Concubine Lan Lan flew out of our hero's storage ring in order to deal with the lying blonde. The girl who accused our hero was really scared when she saw a real ghost in front of her. Lan Lan grabbed the blonde by the throat and told her to tell the truth, or she would be killed. The girl immediately agreed. The boss did not lose hope that the girl would finally confess to slandering Tang Xiaobao, and that he was not guilty of the crime at all. Soon the subordinates came to Chief Du and reported that the victim claimed that she had been instructed to frame Tang Xiaobao. The police officer who interrogated the main character was stunned when he heard that the blonde had finally confessed to everything. Lan Lan gestured to our hero with her hand and assured him that she had completed her task while he was still sitting in the interrogation chair. Tang Xiaobao asked the police officer if the girl had confessed to who ordered her to do it, and the officer replied that she had no idea who was behind it. When the main character was able to return to school, his classmate was very happy to see him again. He said that he was very worried about him. The young miracle doctor became alert and turned his head to look at the man who had caught his attention. He exchanged a sweet glance with Huoya while his classmate was still chatting with him. The girl also looked at him, smiling. As the boy walked to sit down at his desk, he felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. Someone had sent him a message. It turned out that Huoya had written to him from a new number, inviting him to meet her after school in the nearby forest, and personally telling him not to forget to come. The main character broke into a contented smile because this forest near the school was considered by everyone to be a sea of love. When they met in the forest, the girl said that she heard that he was framed because of her message. Tang Xiaobao asked her not to worry, because it had nothing to do with her. Huoya turned away and said that it was a pity that they couldn't catch the criminal. The stunned guy asked if she knew who was behind it. The flower of the school replied that she was sure that Sinan, the guy who wanted her to marry him, was behind this. The girl admitted that she was sorry that she had brought so much trouble to the guy. He replied that it was nothing to worry about, and that he was never afraid of trouble. She tried to convey to Tang Xiaobao that he didn't know Shinan and his powerful family at all, and that they definitely couldn't handle him. Tang Xiaobao grabbed her hand and asked if she was really going to sacrifice herself and marry a man she didn't like to spend the rest of her life with him. Huoya, who was almost in tears from helplessness, looked at Xiaobao and asked what else she could do in this situation. The protagonist asked her not to worry and promised that sooner or later he would force Shinan to retreat, and she replied that she wished that day would come sooner. When the miracle doctor returned home after school, the first thing he thought was that he had come to the wrong place, because his house looked different. Mr. Ma approached him and asked what Xiaobao thought, since he had turned his house into a villa. The guy said thank you to the gentleman for paying for the construction. The protagonist felt awkward and told the man that he didn't think it was a very good idea. Ma Ming asked him not to mention it and to be assured that it did not cost much money since Jiang Ming had given away more than half of the building materials for free. Tang Xiaobao was stunned when he heard that Li Jiangming offered to give his family building materials for free. Ma Ming replied that Li had to, because he was a shrewd guy and he couldn't be too strict with him. Suddenly, a worried old woman ran out of the house and told Xiaobao's father that Xiao Cao had broken her leg and needed urgent help. The main character and his father were shocked when they heard that this had happened to their daughter and little sister. Tang Xiaobao and his father immediately went to the city hospital where Tang Xiaocao was currently being treated after being injured. The girl lay on the hospital bed with her eyes closed, her lips pursed, and she courageously endured the pain in her leg. Professor Zhang told the director that the head injury was not serious. A couple of stitches would be enough, but the girl's leg was more serious. The protagonist mentally turned to Lan Lan and asked if she had any solutions. She replied that first he needed to find the blue dragon herb. Tang Xiaobao was frightened when he heard that he needed to find a rare ingredient. He had no idea where to find this plant. He immediately informed Professor Zhang that he could cure his little sister's leg, but he needed a plant and would return no later than this evening. The man asked the professor if they could trust him, and he told him to just do as Tang Xiaobao said and wait for another miracle. After heading into the mountain forest, Tang Tang showed the stunned Xiaobao the blue dragon grass, whose leaves resemble saws and are often fed to livestock by villagers. Tantan picked a leaf and said that this plant can make muscles grow and improve blood circulation, and if you rub the leaf on a bone, it will heal in a week. Tang Xiaobao was skeptical because people said that fractures take at least 100 days to heal. He wondered how much money they could make if they mass-produced blue dragon grass juice. The ghost woman became wary when she sensed something was wrong nearby in the forest. She immediately confessed to her master that she could smell a spirit ghost nearby. Xiaobao asked if she meant a creature like her. Sharpening her senses, Tantan immediately determined that these were two ghost generals who were currently fighting nearby. A frightened Tang Xiaobao immediately ran away, but the woman stopped him, saying that this was a very rare opportunity, and she hoped that the guy could help her. Tang Tang said that if she could obtain their spiritual power, she would definitely become a spiritual queen and be more useful to her master. Xiaobao scratched his head and agreed, but only on the condition that they leave immediately if any danger arose. The woman handed the master some herbs and told him to crush them and rub them into his hand, because they protect against these ghosts. Xiao Bao was surprised. Meanwhile, in the night forest, the battle continued between two ghost generals, one of them completely black and the other in white clothes. Tang Xiaobao and Tang Tang watched from afar. Hiding, the woman reassured him, saying that he had a talisman that would protect him from the attacks of ghosts. The protagonist looked at the concubine in shock and assumed that she wanted to say that he needed to do something, but she interrupted him, telling him to be quiet. But it was too late. The ghost generals heard the voice of our hero and turned their attention to the presence of the stranger. The young miracle doctor plucked up his courage and went out into the forest clearing to meet the ghosts face to face. The long-tongued ghost general turned his attention to Lan Lan and promised to give Xiaobao the tomb if he allowed him to take it. The second ghost general with pointy ears told the enemy that he could only dream because a beautiful girl was much more important than a tomb. The white-robed ghost screamed that the girl would be his if he got her first and rushed forward to take her. The protagonist took out the amulet and activated it. It lit up with a bright light, after which a loud explosion thundered. Tang Xiaobao looked at the ghost with a sly smile and declared that it was finished as he activated his protective amulet. The long-tongued ghost growled in pain as Tang Xiaobao went on the offensive and attacked him, punching him in the stomach. One blow was enough to knock the ghost down. Tang immediately walked towards him to suck out all the spiritual energy. The second ghost general, with sharp teeth and black skin, tensed as his opponent was defeated by a simple boy. He was startled when Tang Xiaobao used teleportation and appeared right in front of his face, asking with a smirk if he wanted to escape. The ghost general didn't even have time to respond. Tantan had already appeared from behind and began to suck out all of his spiritual energy. Once she did so, Tang thanked her master and declared that she would become a spiritual queen after she rested for a while. It was already late, so the protagonist suggested that the concubine return to the hospital. He realized that today he would have to take a risk. As soon as Tang Xiaobao arrived at the hospital, he shouted, telling everyone that he had obtained the herb he needed, but he needed to perform the operation alone. The hospital director became angry, assuming that Xiaobao was just joking, and Professor Zhang told the man to listen to the boy and allowed the operation to proceed. In the room there were only Tang Xiaobao, his assistant Tang, and his younger sister, who was lying on the bed. The guy suggested starting the operation. The hospital director was angry and dissatisfied, and he told Professor Zhang that he thought this Tang Xiaobao was too arrogant. He was taken aback when Professor Zhang replied that if the boy succeeded this time, he wanted to hire him as an expert doctor at the hospital. Soon the operation was completed. The miracle doctor left the room and asked Professor Zhang to transfuse some blood to his sister. The director was shocked that the guy finished in 10 minutes. Xiaobao replied that he shouldn't think that if he can't do it, then the guy can't either. Professor Zhang admitted that he wanted to hire Xiaobao to work at the hospital, but Xiaobao replied that he had neither a medical license nor the time to do so. The old man promised that he would get a license for the guy, and he would not have to go to the hospital every day, and the salary would be 10,000 yen a month. The conditions seemed attractive to our hero, and he happily agreed, because 10,000 was a good sum for him. The following events took place on Monday, with the main character again spending time in the city hospital. Entering his sister's room, Xiaobao asked Xiaokao how she was feeling, and said that her parents had told him to take the girl to school. The girl assured her brother that everything was fine and that she would go to school on her own, but that it would be better for Xiaobao to stay in the hospital for now. When the protagonist was working in the hospital with Professor Zhang, someone shouted to the brilliant Dr. Tang that his sister had been kidnapped. Shocked, Tang Xiaobao immediately jumped up from his chair and screamed, still not realizing what had happened. The guy immediately used the system to use teleportation and instantly found himself outside the hospital grounds. Waving his arms, he began to run forward rapidly to save his little sister from the hands of the kidnappers. Soon Tang Xiaobao caught up with a white car that was racing along the road. Those inside thought that our hero was not a person, but a ghost. Because he ran so fast, the guy stopped the car and ordered them to let his sister go. The kidnappers shouted that they couldn't do it because their boss urgently needed a kidney. The red-haired guy and the tall blonde guy got out of the car and shouted, asking our hero if the brat was looking for trouble. The protagonist focused on fighting back if necessary and mentally gave a command to Lan to get ready. 3 big guys were ready to grab our hero, but before they could say anything, one of them was already injured. It was Lan, who was floating in the air with a smile on her face, armed with a baseball bat, and she hit one of the criminals. Soon our hero managed to save his little sister. He held her in his arms and asked her not to worry anymore. Xiao Cao said that she knew that her brother would come and save her. The officer patted the boy on the back and praised him for his excellent work, and stated that he would hold an award ceremony for him later. Tang Xiaobao thanked the policeman and was delighted when he said that the media would soon arrive and the boy would be shown on television. As the protagonist was preparing to speak to reporters, the officer told him that they had transferred $1 million bonus to his bank account. The man told the boy to get ready to go on stage, and still stunned by such an award, Tang Xiaobao said that he was already on his way. When Tang Xiaobao came on stage, he started stuttering while trying to thank everyone. Someone shouted at old Tang that you can't build a wall out of mud since he didn't remember his lines. Huoya, who was also in the audience at the time, laughed, covering her mouth with her hand when Xiaobao was made fun of. After the performance, all of Xiaobao's thoughts were occupied by the $1 million that he had been given, and he was wondering how he should spend this money. Having activated the system, the guy was confident that he would rise to the 5th level of reputation after his performance was shown on TV, and he would pass the entrance exams with the best results. During the graduation dinner, Xiaobao tried to call Huoya. She was not at the party. He was worried that she was being forced to marry Xinan again. The protagonist dialed the girl's number to call and find out if she would be attending an important party for the whole class today. Soon our hero was speaking to reporters again, having made history by scoring a record 742 points on his entrance exams. Tan's family and friends drank to celebrate the boy's success. He not only caught human traffickers, but also became the country's top university applicant. Tang Xiaobao's father agreed with his relative's flattering comments, stating that his son had done a lot for their village. The guy was very happy when the system notified him that he had finally reached the 5th level of reputation and received the telekinesis skill. He scratched the back of his head when he also received a drop of holy water from the heavenly river, as he began to see a way for the marshal and the weaver to return home. Now that Xiaobao had reached the 5th level and mastered all types of surgery, he still had to learn the recipes for pills and the knowledge of spirits and destinies, which meant he had a long way to go. A classmate, seeing our hero, approached the top-performing student and asked him what he dreamed of and where he planned to go to college. The guy smiled and replied that he was just thinking about it for now, and asked if he knew where Huoya had gone. The protagonist looked at his classmate with fear when he asked the old man if he was serious about not receiving a message from the girl. Tang Xiaobao realized that Huoya had not tried to contact him, because she was afraid that Xinan would take revenge on him, and he promised her that he would definitely save the girl. When the young miracle doctor walked out of school, a whole crowd of men approached him and asked if he knew Tang Xiaobao. The protagonist answered the men that he was that very Tang Xiaobao and asked what they wanted from him. The boys' eyes lit up with adoration, and they began to advertise their universities, Yan, Jiangxi, and Huaqing, in unison, as they were from their admissions committees. The protagonist replied that he appreciated them coming to find him, but he decided to enroll in Tet Yan University to study medicine. But in fact, Tang Xiaobao only wanted to enter this university because Huoya had previously told him that she hoped to study there. At the hospital, Professor Zhang shook the boy's hand and said that he was truly a genius, since 3 major universities were fighting for him. Tang Xiaobao told the professor that he was on duty. The old man put his hand on his shoulder and asked him not to worry, because everything had already been prepared for him. The main character was dissatisfied when he approached the right door and saw that it said, Gynecological Department. When Tang Xiaobao arrived at the department, all eyes were on him. People were surprised that such a young male doctor was working as a gynecologist. A girl came to the department and asked Tan to examine her first, because she had a severe stomachache. He told her to stand in line like everyone else. The girl was shocked when she raised her head and saw Tang Xiaobao sitting in front of her. She knew this guy and didn't expect that he was a doctor. Xiaobao was surprised that she knew him. The girl replied that everyone knew him, because he was a famous student who passed all the entrance exams with the best scores. The boys didn't understand why Xiaobao was working in the hospital if he was the best student, and they began to doubt the young doctor's qualifications. The protagonist stood up and asked a girl from his school if she was sure that the guy should examine her. The patient whispered in the young man's ear that she was actually a fan of his, so she wouldn't complain even if she didn't feel better after the examination. Hearing that it was his admirer, the hero looked at the girl with a degree of distrust, but asked her to follow him for an examination. The girl lay down on the hospital bed in a seductive pose, her face flushed with embarrassment before the gaze of her idol. Xiaobao said there was no need to undress. He would just give her acupuncture and write a prescription to relieve her pain. After the procedure, the girl screamed that Xiaobao was simply amazing, because he cured her with just acupuncture, and the guy advised her to pay more attention to her diet. When Xiaobao returned to the corridor, he was surrounded by a whole crowd of patients, the women asking for the miracle doctor to examine them too, and complaining of pain. When the protagonist finished examining everyone, he sighed heavily and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He wondered where Dr. Chen had gone. The guy noticed a woman in a white coat from his department. She was sighing heavily and was clearly irritated. Seeing her behavior, Tang Xiaobao realized that he had just made an enemy in the hospital and was indifferent to it. When Xiaobao reached reputation level 6, he realized that he wouldn't receive any rewards from the system until level 10, so he would just have to keep working hard. On another workday, Xiaobao told the patient to take her medication on time, and Professor Zhang asked the boy to help him examine a cancer patient. The protagonist was surprised when he received such a request because he thought that he only worked in the gynecological department. Professor Zhang explained that the patient was his mother-in-law, she had stomach cancer, and he hoped that the guy would help her to ease the pain. The guy stood up and went to the patient. He didn't mind helping the professor examine his wife's mother. After examining the woman, the young miracle doctor declared that the woman's cancer cells had spread and that conventional treatment would not be effective. When the old man asked how much longer she had left, Xiaobao replied that she still had up to 5 years left, but he was just thinking about how to completely cure her cancer. Overjoyed, Zhang grabbed him by the shoulders and asked if the boy was sure he could cure terminal cancer. The protagonist replied that he would be looking for medicinal herbs this weekend, and if he found them, there was a 70% chance that his mother-in-law would be cured. When Xiaobao asked if the professor had any black phoenix grass or hidden dragon grass, the old man honestly replied that it was the first time he had heard of them. Xiaobao sighed heavily, concluding that these medicinal herbs were only described in the super medicine book, so he would have to go to the mountains to find them. Soon the main character did just that. He went to the high green mountain that was behind his village. He quickly managed to find the hidden dragon herb as well as some other medicinal herbs from the super medical book. Once the protagonist had collected all the necessary plants, he went back to the hospital to continue helping the sick. He was surprised when a journalist approached him and introduced herself as the host of the TV show Romantic Scientist and invited him to appear on the show. The guy replied that he still had patients he needed to check on, so he didn't have time to go on their TV show. The presenter, holding the microphone in her hand, said that one day would be enough for filming, and for this they would pay the guy 10,000. Professor Zhang intervened and said that Tong Xiaobao was very busy saving lives, so she could only conduct an interview by observing the miracle doctor at work. The protagonist began the acupuncture procedure, inserting silver needles into the required points, after which they began to turn black. Professor Zhang thought that Xiaobao was cultivating every day. He himself would never have thought that such herbs could cure stomach cancer. A journalist asked Zhang if Xiaobao's method really worked, and the professor replied that he had no reason to lie since the patient was his own mother-in-law. Tang Xiaobao smiled and wiped his forehead. He was confident that he would gain a lot of reputation points if a report about him curing cancer was aired on TV. Indeed, the news soon reported that Tang Xiaobao was not only a top student, but also a doctor at the county hospital. When the news spread, patients began to flock to the hospital, screaming and begging the incomparable Dr. Tang to cure their cancer too. Tang Xiaobao arrived at the hospital but was stopped in the corridor by a doctor who asked why the young man was stealing patients from other departments. The protagonist replied that he was hired to treat sick people and asked the guy who he was. The doctor in the white coat introduced himself as Zhuang Huansheng from dermatology, and he had come here to teach Xiaobao some of the rules of the field. Without listening, Xiaobao left and said that if Dr. Zhuang didn't like something, he should convey it to Chief Physician Zhang. Zhuang shouted that our hero was only behaving this way because he had Professor Zhang's support. The next day, while Xiaobao was resting in the hospital, the doctor asked him to come and see a dermatology patient who had gone into shock after an injection. Smiling, the protagonist replied that they would be better off turning to Zhuan Huansheng, since he had just caused him trouble and now it would not be so easy to convince the guy. The desperate dermatology doctor replied that Zhuan had no ideas, and that he knew that Xiaobao was very skilled in medicine and could save the patient. The protagonist put his arm around the doctor's shoulders and said that he had to go and tell the head doctor about this, and not let them force him to take the blame. Professor Zhang arrived and told our hero that Xiao Wu had already told him everything, and if the patient died, it would negatively affect the hospital's reputation. Tang Xiaobao refused to go anywhere because otherwise he would steal someone else's patient, and some people would be unhappy about it. Zhang told Dr. Zhuan that he personally asked Xiaobao to work here, and Zhuan could talk to the professor if he was unhappy about anything. The professor tried to convince Xiaobao that the patient's life was at stake, and he needed to save him first and then demand an apology from Zhuan. Wanting to get Dr. Zhuan to repent, our hero smiled and asked his colleague what he had to say about this. Dr. Zhuan was very angry. He frowned, looked at our hero, and tried to say something, but he was interrupted. It was the patient's relative. She screamed that they, the bastards, would be buried with her husband if he died, and the guards had already taken the woman by the arms. Professor Zhang advised the woman not to interfere or make a scene, as peace and quiet were needed for the patient to survive her husband's life. The nurse shouted to Dr. Zhuan that the patient's vital signs were declining and the kidney was failing, and Zhuan allowed Xiaobao to examine the patient. When Xiaobao examined the patient, he said the man was supposed to be given 1 injection, but was given 2, and he was lucky he didn't die. Zhuan shouted that he shouldn't believe such nonsense, but the head physician ordered him to shut up and promised to deal with the doctor later. The protagonist urgently began an acupuncture procedure. All the silver needles turned black when he inserted them into the acupuncture points. The nurse immediately informed the doctors that the patient's condition was stabilizing and that his pulse and breathing were rapidly returning to normal. Professor Zhang shamed Dr. Zhuan and asked if he thought the man should apologize to Tang Xiaobao. Dr. Zhuan bowed his head before our hero, asked for forgiveness, and thanked the miracle doctor for saving the patient. The head doctor told the protagonist that he was very sorry about what happened and promised to take good care of this bastard. Tang Xiaobao smiled broadly and told the old man that he was relying on him and that it was time for him to leave. Soon the professor's mother-in-law was shown on television, and it was reported that the stomach cancer patient whom Xiaobao had treated had recovered and was in full health. As a tired Xiaobao sat at his desk, a brazen man in a dark jacket cut in line to get to him. With an ingratiating smile, he introduced himself as Wuyang Tian and invited the boy to work at Huoming Hospital, the most expensive private hospital in the country. The protagonist was not happy about this offer because he knew that human hospitals were terrible, and many patients died there due to medical negligence. Wu Yangtian said that the salary is about 500,000 a year plus bonuses, and with Xiaobao's skills, he is confident that the guy can earn up to 6 million a year. Xiaobao, not listening to the man, asked if he had finished yet, and if so, he should leave the room, because real patients were waiting for the miracle doctor. The man insisted on his own, asking Xiaobao to think carefully about his proposal before refusing it. Leaning his head on his hand, the protagonist said that he would have to treat the man if he had not heard what the doctor had just said. Wu Yangtian warned the boy that he would regret it, because anyone who goes against their hospital usually ends badly. The man then called someone and said that he wanted to report to Director Liu Minghao about a person who was illegally practicing medicine. Soon, Tang Xiaobao met with a police officer, and the man suggested that the boy go to a quiet place and discuss the kidnapping. The police chief told the young man that they had arrested a group behind human trafficking, but that was not the end of the matter. Tang Xiaobao suggested that there was someone else behind the group, and the man replied that the person who was helping the traffickers was in Jiangnan City. A grin appeared on the protagonist's face when he heard about Jiangnan City, because he guessed who it could be. A crowd of men in suits burst into the hospital, one of them shouting that they had been informed about a doctor who was illegally practicing medicine there. Tang Xiaobao tilted his head to the side and stared at the white-haired man, asking who he was. The man asked if the boy really didn't remember him, since it was he who had cured his son for 100,000 yuan, and asked him not to say that Xiaobao had forgotten everything. Our hero realized that Liu Qiang's father was standing in front of him and realized that his enemy's father was the head of the health department. The protagonist asked the nurses to inform the patients outside that Xiaobao would not be able to conduct screenings until lunch. Professor Zhang sighed heavily and told Xiaobao that he couldn't help him this time, since Huoming Hospital had filed a lawsuit against the boy. The guy no longer had the right to work at the hospital. He returned home, and right on the doorstep, the system awarded him the 8th level of reputation. His assistant Tantan was sitting in the room. She greeted her master. He asked if the girl had risen to the level of the Spirit King, and she replied that she could now remain under the sun and always be close to her master. This news made the main character happy. He thought that it turns out not everything in his life is so bad. The next action took place in Tang Xiaobao's house, where a white car was parked and a man got out. The young miracle doctor and his parents came out of the house to greet the uninvited guest. Xiaobao asked the man what he was doing there. Liu Qiang's father replied that he had come to discuss some matters with Xiaobao, as the boy had already seen how influential their private hospital could be. Enraged, the protagonist asked the man to leave the area, otherwise he would set his dog on him. The head of the health department concluded that Xiaobao did not understand when to stop, so he agreed to wait a little longer and observe. Once home, the father told his son that the man looked like a walking nuisance, and the mother suggested that the official had an ace up his sleeve. The main character got angry when someone rang the doorbell. The guy assumed that it was that man again. Tang Xiaobao opened the door and asked the guest who he was. The man who brought the old man asked the boy to help his grandfather. The young man replied that he could help, but he did not have a medical license, so he would not take responsibility if something went wrong. The patient offered the miracle doctor to sign a contract according to which the man would take full responsibility if something went wrong. The protagonist replied to his grandfather that no contract was needed and asked him to wait there while the guy brought him his medicine. In the room, he asked Lan Lan if she knew how to improve the pill. The girl said that she could improve the effectiveness of the medicine. Lan Lan folded her arms and declared that she was the Spirit King, and naturally she knew how to refine medicines. Having done the deed, she said that this pill would begin to work within half an hour, but she would not be able to make the medicine so often, because it takes a lot of spiritual energy. Tang Xiaobao asked what she would say if the guy opened a pharmaceutical factory, and they used modern technology to produce drugs. The Queen of Spirits replied that the boy could do it, but the effect of such drugs would be much weaker, and patients would have to take them for a very long time. The young miracle doctor suggested that they talk about this next time, but for now it was worth curing the patient. An elderly man with terminal cancer soon agreed to take the pill our hero brought him. After Grandpa took the medicine, the protagonist asked Mr. Yu how he was feeling. The old man immediately jumped up from his chair and threw his cane aside. He declared that he felt great after taking that pill. The patient told the respected doctor that he didn't know how to express his gratitude for saving his life, and handed the guy an envelope containing 2 million yuan. When Tang Xiaobao finally lay down in his room to rest, his sister screamed that something serious had happened. The boy immediately came out of his room and asked his little sister what happened and why she was screaming. The worried girl asked her brother to quickly look at something and said that Tang Xiaobao needed to do something urgently. Xiaokao showed her brother the news on her laptop that it had been discovered that he, a talented doctor, had been treating people without a license. The protagonist realized that this news was probably published with the help of the human hospital, which was targeting him. The girl picked up the phone and said that she would call Hua lawyer right away to ask her for help. Tang Xiaobao asked his sister not to do this so as not to disturb the girl, and Xiaokao asked her brother what they should do then.